Hello, I'm back with another podcast for you and your listening pleasure. Not sure how pleasurable it is, but yeah, I'm back. It's been a while since I've done one of these, and I just thought I would say hi, check in with you all, say thank you very much for sticking with the podcast. I know we've not been uploading on our regular schedule, whatever that was. It's supposed to be twice a month, but you know, with the commentary tracks and stuff, I've thrown a couple extra in there, here and there. But I've been a little bit busy recently, and I've not been able to record. So hopefully things are getting back on track, so I can get more of these podcasts out there for you guys, whether or not, you know, you want them. They're coming, so make of that what you will. And yeah, what more can I say? I had fun with this one. This is a little bit different. This is me and Mr. Chris Manning, who is an old colleague and old friend from back in the cinema days. Me and Lee both used to work with him. He's been on the podcast before. He did the Lord of the Rings episode when we covered the Fellowship of the Ring. And I'm looking forward to getting him back on again to continue on with the Lord of the Rings saga in the near future. But in this conversation we had, we kind of went everywhere apart from Face Off. You know, we did talk about Face Off eventually, but there wasn't a whole lot of Face Off. We kind of got sidetracked, and it's one of those things because I've not really spoken to Chris, you know, in a actual face-to-face, so to speak, conversation since we wrapped the Lord of the Rings episode. So it was good to have a bit of a catch-up with him, probe his thoughts on certain questions that have been popping into my mind about movies and the upcoming streaming services and all that kind of stuff that we get into on the podcast. So I really enjoyed having a chat with him and a good old catch-up. And hopefully you guys will, come on this little journey with us. And, what more can I say? I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much for sticking with the podcast while I've been absent. Hopefully that won't happen again. And I hope to make it up to you guys by getting out some more content in the very near future. So keep your eyes peeled, and again, thanks for sticking with us. Choose life, choose a job, choose a career, choose a family, choose a fucking big television, choose washing machines, cars, compact disc players and electrical cinemas. Choose a podcast, choose the Untitled Film Podcast. We're good to go, we're live, we're rocking and rolling, mate. So, Mr. Chris Manning, welcome back to the podcast. How the devil are you?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's great to be back. I'm in good health, thank you. I've just finished work on the Friday night a few hours ago, so I'm finally settled down on my sofa with a beer. I've just thrown a sandwich down my neck due to a bit of a late night, and I'm looking forward to having a good catch up and a chat.
Happy days. Now, for people who don't know or haven't caught up with previous episodes of this podcast,
why wouldn't they? Why wouldn't they do that?
Yeah, why wouldn't you? So we, as well as Mr. Peake, who is not with us tonight because he didn't really give us a reason. We invited him onto it, but I suppose he just wanted a night to himself, didn't he? So I'm not going to hold that against him. But me and you used to work together with Lee. So, you know, it is like a little Usher's reunion, this, isn't it? So
it is, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you boys again. I know best wishes to Mr. Peake, and hopefully get a chance to chat to him again soon. But you're a more than adequate replacement, mate. Don't worry about that.
More than adequate. Wow, that's the best compliment I've had in a long time. So I'll take it. I will take that. Obviously, it's not the first time that you've been on the podcast because you were on the first Lord of the Rings episode that we did. Hopefully, we'll be following that up in the not so.
That was the first ever time and all the podcasts I've ever done in my entire life that I actually listened to it back. I've never ever listened to myself back ever, so I always think, well, it's going to sound like an absolute lemon. But so I enjoyed our conversation so much. I was driving down south for work one day, and it was obviously of a reasonable length, the show. So it kept me entertained all the way down, driving down towards Kent for work. So yeah, I really enjoyed that, and hopefully, we can dive back into that that series before too long.
Yeah, it did trigger up some like old memories that have been long
Mm.
since dormant in the back of my mind. I was kind of like I didn't even know I had those memories still kind of like swimming around in the back of my brain. But it was a really good conversation. I enjoyed it as well.
Me too, mate.
I don't try. I try not to listen back to the podcast because, like you say, you always feel a little bit self conscious and feel a bit of a twit. So I upload them and I let them go into the ether kind of thing. So
Exactly. Release them into the wild, mate. It's the
yeah,
best
there's
way.
not much you can do. Although that said, we did get our first piece of negative kind of feedback on
Oh,
the comments section on Podbean. Um, this
interesting.
I'm not going to name and shame, but I mean, if anyone wants to go and look, it's in the comments there. It was just one guy who just put pathetic on the last episode, which was the Transformers episode. So I replied back to him, and it's kind of like you shouldn't really feed trolls, and I don't think he's been a troll because I know he's been active in another community. But I just sent a question saying I'm sorry that you didn't enjoy the episode, but like I actually listened to the Transformers episode with Dean from Jump Cancel and Lee. Dean was obviously filling in for me because of all the shit
Yeah.
that's been going on in you know the personal life kind of thing. So I was really appreciative for him to actually step in and you know take my place on that. And it was disappointing for someone just to put like pathetic underneath it, and because I actually listened to the episode and I enjoyed it just as an audience viewer. So I was kind of like,
Yeah.
can you just clarify what you found disappointing about it? And nothing, just got stonewalled, no reply back. So
Well, hopefully they're referring to the film and not you guys, because I can't imagine
fingers
that
crossed.
anyone would
Yeah, yeah,
listen to it. Not just an authentic pair of lads just chatting about a film. Don't have to be the
yeah,
best film in the world. That's sometimes more fun when it's not the best film in the
yeah,
world. But
yeah.
there's still no need to be a dick because they're on the internet. It's a rule I learned a while ago. Having in my younger days, everyone's had the little trollish moments, but just try not to be a dick
Yeah,
as
just
much as you possibly can. It's the main thing you can get through life, I think.
coming from someone who is an absolute grump in real life, just try and be a nice person. Do you know what I mean? I do try. I fail very frequently, but I do try. But the older I get, the harder I find it to deal with kind of like stupidity and stupid people. And unfortunately,
Yeah,
there's a lot of them out there, especially like you
there
say on the
certainly
internet.
is.
So you can't really get away from them.
And they're
Um,
all very good at it as well. That's the trouble.
yeah, yeah. But then get them face to face, and they probably wouldn't say boo to a goose. But that's a
No, you're
different
probably very,
conversation
very
for
true.
another time. Um, let's try and get onto the movie talk and away from trolls and
Mm.
all that kind of shit. Now, obviously, you know how it goes on this podcast. Me and Lee normally catch up on things that we've been watching. Before we actually get into the main topic of what we're actually here to talk about. So, there's been quite a few things obviously out in the cinemas and on Netflix and shows that have been up and down. Have you been watching anything that you have
I've been,
enjoyed recently?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I went away for a couple of weeks on my summer holiday, so I was a little bit behind on seeing a few things. Obviously, last time you and I really spoke with John Wick 3 was just about to come out, or it had just come out,
Hmm.
so I saw that in the pictures. A lot of my focus really at the moment has been taken up by Joker. I can't get it out of my mind. I'm trying my hardest not to watch any trailers now. I'm at that phase. Same with Star Wars, with the upcoming Star Wars in December. I don't want to see any more trailers, and I feel the same about Joker a little bit. I'm so
Hmm.
excited for that film. I
Hmm.
don't really want to ruin it for myself. So my
Um,
cinema going has been restricted a little bit
okay.
of late to watching films at home as well. Obviously, being on holiday, it costs a lot of money, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But me and the missus did go to watch, we did go to the pictures last couple of weeks, but it's completely gone out of my mind what we went to see. But yeah, I still love going to cinema as much as I ever did when I was working there. It really was a labour of love back in the day.
Hmm.
But I've been watching plenty at home, as I always tend to do. Um, having come off the back of watching Spider-Man: Far From Home, took me eldest to go and watch that along with the wife.
What did you make of that?
At the time, I loved it to Pete. I thought it was great. After listening to maybe one or two people, to other movie podcasts. Unfortunately, there are other ones out there, mate.
That's fine.
Who were
We're like
perhaps
the
perhaps
BBC.
not.
Other podcasts are available. So
That's right. Yeah, get them at all good record shops.
yeah.
Um, they weren't quite so critical, and they kind of made me question myself a little bit and whether I kind of caught up in the moment a little bit. And I think that's probably true. Because being there and then, yeah, you get caught up in the spectacle and the drama of the action and things like that. But ultimately, in hindsight, and with a little bit of critical analysis behind it, I'm not sure that one's going to stand up as a classic to go down through the years. I think in
Yeah,
hindsight, having seen Homecoming again since after watching Far From Home,
it's a
I
better
think it's
film.
it's
It
far
is a better film.
superior.
Yeah,
Mm,
I mean, I did I've been trying to do these car park movie reviews where, like, when I'm driving home
I
from the
really enjoy
cinema, I'll throw them up on, just throw my thoughts on a video clip and put it on YouTube. And I remember coming out of the cinema after that, and I was kind of like, there was elements that I enjoyed, specifically the stuff that the imagery that they used around Mysterio, especially in
it. Mm.
like the hallucination slash hologram kind of like scenes. I thought some of the imagery in that was really, really good. And I liked the direction that they were going with Mysterio and how they modernized him and made him more relevant. Um,
Yeah, because there's only so much you can do with a man with a fishbowl on his head without making it appear almost, even for Spider-Man, making it appear too
yeah.
cartoony. But then, conversely, I thought that it was at its best when it became a bit more like Into the Spider-Verse, when
Mm.
it started doing all that trippy shit. And I thought that was when it was actually, by far at its best.
Yeah, I mean, the whole fishbowl kind of costume is ridiculous, but it works on the page because, there've been obviously some great artists, and, they've put him in dynamic poses and the use of color and all that kind of stuff. On the page, it works very well. In real life, it could have come off really kind of like, like, I don't know, like fancy dress
Yeah,
shop
just a bit
maybe.
naff.
But I
Yeah,
just thought
just
the
a bit
way that
naff.
they actually incorporated it and made it, spoilers if anyone hasn't seen
Mm,
it, but made it as a motion capture suit and grounded it in the real world. I thought that was fucking
absolutely.
absolutely inspired the way they did that.
Yeah, it was a
Um,
really good way of capturing it, wasn't it? And
yeah,
I totally agree with you. In hindsight, it definitely wasn't what I thought it was at the time. But I often get caught up like that when I go watching a film. I remember coming out watching Hook, thinking it was the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. So I've obviously not learned anything
see,
over the years.
I've softened my stance on Hook. I didn't used to like
Mm,
Hook, but the more time as time goes on, the Hook actually becomes a much more relevant film for me.
yeah,
With
definitely,
the themes of
definitely.
obviously growing old and forgetting who you used to be and all that kind of stuff. And I think it was actually quite ahead of its time. So yeah, I've actually softened my stance on that. But
I've
yeah, Far
I've
From
just
Home. Sorry, go on.
no. Sorry, can you carry on, mate? I was going to
I
change
was
the
just going to
subject, but
say
let you
Far
finish
From
off.
Home. It just took too long to get anywhere, but when it got to where it needed to be, when we had the kind of midway twist, I thought that's where the film kind of took off. Everything that happened in the first half was a little bit laborious.
Yeah,
And
it
I
was a
just
good
want to
hour,
see
I think,
Spider Man
before it kicked off,
swing in.
wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, yeah. I just want to see Spider Man back in New York. However, that's kind of another sore point because since last the podcast was recorded, obviously the whole Spider Man thing is blown up now. So Spider Man is no longer
Hmm.
in the MCU. So, what are your thoughts on that?
It's a curious one. I've mainly followed it through your comments, to be honest, which I fully agree with. It's one of
Mm.
those weird business decisions that it makes me question really what the future of the MCU is, and no doubt it's in solid hands, and I've got no doubt at all that they'll probably come to an agreement at some point in the future. But it felt right, didn't it, that the Tom Holland iteration of Spider-Man in that universe,
Mm.
and so to then to take him out again and give him that uncertainty, I'm not really in the mood for another reboot, I must say.
It seems
And
very self sabotage on not
it
just
just doesn't really make
this
any
isn't
sense, does it?
Sony's fault either. This is both parties, I think, being a little bit
Mm,
too greedy for their own goods, and obviously Disney
indeed.
think they've got all the money in the world with having both Marvel and Star Wars and starting up the new Disney Plus streaming service. That they're literally poised to take over the world now. Um,
Did
so
you see that article in the paper last week where it said that in America last year, one in every three cinema tickets sold was for a Disney product, a Disney something, a Disney like a Disney IP kind of thing.
yeah, it doesn't
It
surprise
was
me.
incredible.
It's a scary because obviously they've taken over Fox as well, so all of that kind of like the film catalog there has all been absorbed into the Disney. So franchises like Alien, Predator, they're under
Yeah,
the
well,
Disney banner. The X-Men are obviously back with Marvel, although they've yet to announce what they're going to do with that. Um,
it just opens up lots of exciting possibilities, but also lots of really naff ones as well. I mean,
yeah.
in theory, like you say, you could have Star Wars meets Predator or the Avengers against Alien, that kind of thing, and it would all be intellectual property wise, it would all be perfectly legitimate and logical. But no, it's a no from me.
Yeah,
But when you were talking about X-Men before, it just triggered a couple of things. Well, I remembered what I went to see with the missus. We went to watch Angel Has Fallen, which is the third in the well, now it's known as the Has Fallen trilogy. I
I
don't think
haven't
it had
seen
that title
any of those,
beforehand.
so
The first two, I would be honest with you, are identical films, just set in different cities.
right,
It's
okay.
one's in London, one's in Washington. That's just mindless trash, really, that you can just put on overnight when you've had a bad day at work, you're not really that arsed about what you watch,
Yeah,
and just let it go. I went into the third one really not particularly bothered. The missus was keen to watch it because she's enjoyed those two films, so I thought, well, she sits through all the shite, I take her to watch it, the pictures, so it was only fair that I returned the favour. But I really enjoyed it, to be honest. It was a pretty nippy 2 hours. And instead of just retreading the same sort of steps it did in the last two, it went in a completely new direction for the series. In hindsight, probably a fairly predictable direction, but I really enjoyed it. It was a good old-fashioned balls to the wall action film with logical leaps that made no sense whatsoever, bizarre dialogue, acting that was, God, who knows when it is. We bore quite a few hallmarks of the film we're going to discuss later, to be honest.
right.
But as a couple of hour long bit of escapism, yeah, it was decent. I think you could probably disregard the first two films and go straight to number three, and not really miss a step.
Right, okay. Because
Mm.
I've been on the fence with them. It's kind of they've never really floated my boat. When I see the trailers and they've got big CGI explosions in them and stuff like that, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
when I go and watch an action film, I want something that's kind of like not grounded in realism per se, but something that is, I want practical effects. I want actual stunt work. I want to see, stunt driving, stunt men doing what they do best.
Yeah,
I don't
I
want to
agree.
see,
I agree.
massive kind of like CGI flames and explosions and crashy bang bang. Um,
Don't get me wrong. Give me Mad Max Fury Road every day of the week for the practical effects. But I did think this was a decent bit of escapism for a Tuesday night at Pictures in Preston. And then at weekend we watched Dark Phoenix together. Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, when you put that on Facebook, I'd literally watched it a couple hours beforehand, and I know I said to
Mm-mm.
Lee that I wasn't gonna watch it, but it was kind of like I had a couple of hours to kill,
There.
and I was just like, right, fuck it, I'm gonna download it, and I'm gonna see how bad this fucking film was, and it was atrocious.
I thought it was
Um,
better than Apocalypse. I thought Apocalypse was pretty much unwatchable, and this had the odd moment here and there, but I just found that that Sophie Turner in the lead just
she's
completely
so bad.
vapid. All she does is stand there with a blank expression on her face, just waving her hands in the air.
Even when
It,
she's like crying, she's just
oh,
emotionless. It's like, how can
yeah,
you be showing emotion and yet showing no emotion whatsoever?
she
She,
just looks bored all the time.
yeah, she just cannot emote
Very
at
strange.
all. And I just thought, all criticism aside, I think obviously there was big reports made about the fact that they reshot the entire ending, and the look of how she was originally supposed to look when she was turning into the Phoenix was apparently too close to the kind of look that they went with Captain Marvel.
Right,
So that's why
right.
they kind of changed it to have like veins, or her skin was cracking, or whatever they were going
I
for.
just don't know why they don't let films just stand on their own 2 feet. And if people want to make comparisons, let them make it. The second guessing of the way the audience is going to respond to things, it really gets on my tip.
Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, because I was really impressed with the reboot that they did with First Class. I thought this is
Yeah,
genuinely something
agreed,
different, and they've got a real
agreed.
handle on the characters and what they're going to do with their characters. And then Days of Future Past came along, and everyone was saying it was great, and I was just kind of like, this isn't what I wanted from the sequel to First
No,
Class. It didn't. It
I
was
agree totally.
all right. I wouldn't go so far as to say it was good. I would just say
I
it's
watched it.
okay.
I watched it again earlier this week. It was on Netflix, and I was. In fact, it was on Tuesday when I came home from the Bolton match. I was all it's up and excited because I've been at the football. It takes me a bit of time sometimes to sort of decompress before I go to call it a night. And I stuck Days of Future Past on, and I remember watching it first time at the pictures, and I'm harking back to what I said earlier about my opinion that the pictures obviously one to be completely disregarded, but I was wrapped to it. I thought it was ace. But then when I was watching it this time, I found myself on my phone a little bit. I was kind
Mm.
of like, got the laptop out, a bit of Football Manager while it was on. I certainly wasn't as captivated by it as I remembered being. I'm going
Yeah,
to go back to First Class in a couple of days, I think, and watch that again too, because having gone back into these films, I like to sort of redo a bit of reading around it and just sort of remind myself of what was happening at the time.
Mm.
And it just reminded myself the general basic story of First Class is just more interesting to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely going to give that a go going forward. But Dark Phoenix will get a huge red arrow. I
Yeah.
wouldn't recommend anyone watches that
No, no.
unless you're a
The best
real
part
massive
of the
kid.
film was actually the final train sequence at the end. I thought,
Mm,
okay, at least it's a bit of action, and I liked how they actually showed Magneto, Michael Fassbender using his powers, shearing off chunks of metal and using them as daggers and all that kind of stuff. I thought
yeah,
if the whole film was more like this, then I would have been on board. But up until this point, absolutely fuck all had happened. That
yeah.
was interesting, and it was
I felt
just
it was only interesting when he showed up. To be honest, throughout the film, and I
hundred
felt
percent.
the same about Apocalypse and the same about Days of Future Past. To be honest, I
Yeah,
find
when they rebooted it with First Class, I was like the dynamic that they have managed to get by casting Fassbender and McAvoy as Xavier and Magneto. That is where this film series needs to go, and they abandoned it
correct.
so fucking quickly because Jennifer
It's a
Lawrence was
shame,
blowing
isn't
up,
it?
and it was the what is to shift focus onto her, and it was just I would like to go back and watch First Class again because I do enjoy the film. However, knowing where the actual film series that it started has finished, it kind of retroactively makes
Y-
in my mind, watching the
Yeah,
film again actually quite off-putting
it's
because
funny you say that. I've had a conversation with a mate at work, very on a very similar vein, because he'd never seen The Godfather before, and I was having a chat with him to say, look, I love Godfather 2, but Godfather 3 makes me dislike the other two,
yeah,
and I don't want to dislike the other two because they're probably in my top 5,000 films of all time.
I'm
There's that
kind
many.
of there with Terminator as well. I'm sad to
Mm,
say. The
it's
more of
definitely
us,
diminishing returns.
yeah, of course it is. I don't really, even though James Cameron is back, as every trailer is, uh, trying to make a massive point in actually portraying, James Cameron returns, yeah, as a producer, and he had a hand in the story. But if you look at who wrote the story, there's James Cameron, and there's about 12 other fucking people credited as writing the film as well, which
Yeah,
is never a good
it's
sign.
kind of it's kind of begging for people to come back and like, look, we're getting the band back together. Honestly, when you imagine that, I'd be amazed if he's even read the script twice.
Yeah,
Let's not make any bones about
he
it. He
might
said
have
he's involved.
had a general vague kind of like direction of where the story was going to go, but then these other 12 people have come in and wrote the thing, and I guarantee he's
Yeah.
not written. And I was saying to my mate last night, because Gears of War is available if you have Game Pass Ultimate a couple of days early, and Sarah Connor is a playable character on multiplayer. She's like a
All
playable
right.
skin,
Okay.
and the T800 is also a playable skin for the Horde side of things. And they're also shoehorning the aged, bearded Arnold Schwarzenegger T800
Wow. Okay.
into Mortal Kombat 11 as well as a playable character. The fact that the Terminator franchise is hitting games up for cross promotional purposes, that is not a good sign to me. And they're doing it
No,
in a
it's
really kind
desperate,
of
isn't it?
yeah. So that tells me that this is going to be another dud, and it's a shame to see because Terminator 1 and Terminator 2 are absolute masterpieces,
Well,
beyond
we were
any
working
question.
together, if you remember, mate, when 3 came out. And do you remember the build up and the hype
I
to that
know.
was equal, or at least it felt to me was not a million miles away from Phantom Menace kind of hype. This was the return of a lock of an absolute guaranteed classic franchise, and look how it ended up. It's just again been a series of diminishing returns
Yeah.
to an unbelievable degree, and I would have no confidence in watching another Terminator film. I don't think
No. I
it
remember
takes
putting the
something a bit
banners up
special.
because it was just like,
Mm,
Schwarzenegger's face and Cristiano Loken's face on black banners, with like half face and half, endo skull and all that kind of stuff. And then when we got the trailer in and it was announced that it was going to be a 12A, that my heart kind of like shrunk at that point. I was kind of like, oh, because the 12A certificate, which was introduced while um, I was working there for, I think Spider-Man 2 was the first one to get a 12A
okay.
certificate. Um, that signaled kind of like the end of films where stories were going to be told regardless of the classification. in
Yeah, it's a bit
favour
of a kiss of
of
death.
watering it down and getting a bigger audience kind of thing. And as soon as Terminator 3 came out and it was announced it was going to be a 12A, I was like, this isn't going to be a Terminator film. Same with Die Hard. When Die Hard 4.0 or Live Free and Die Hard or whatever you want to call it, when that was
Agree.
announced as being a 12A, I was just kind of like, nope. And now we're getting to the point where they're not watering down the films anymore because this new Terminator film is going to have an R rating or what will
Mm.
probably translate to a 15 rating in the UK. Um, Even though they're not watering down the kind of content anymore, the people who are appearing in it are well past the prime, and the stories are also well past the prime. The
Well, exactly.
themes,
What more is that you can say about that? Hence, bringing back Sarah Connor, bringing back the Terminator. I've seen the trailer. It's just all so tired and sad.
yeah,
It's just a shame to see a film. I don't know, my mate Odders, who may be listening to this when it comes out, he's a big fan of Terminator, and I can just imagine, the same way I felt watching Force Awakens when, yeah, it's Carrie Fisher up on screen, but that's Princess Leia's mum. That's not the
yeah,
dynamic, exciting,
yeah,
fit Princess Leia of my childhood. It's exciting. It's great to see them, but it's
yeah.
not the same.
No,
Never the same.
no, and it's going to be really weird actually going into episode 9 and seeing her in there again, knowing obviously that she isn't with us anymore. Um, it's going to be a
But in this era of deep fakes, mate, then I think we're going to be. You could see Carrie Fisher in the next 100 Star Wars films if they really
Well, they
wanted
did it
to.
with Rogue One, didn't they? They brought back Peter
Yeah,
Cushing for Grand Moff
yeah.
Tarkin, and I thought that was, to my eyes, and it's been a while since I've gone back and rewatched it because I think that was a very, very convincing attempt at actually doing a full character recreation. I remember the lad that I went with, Lewis. I asked it. I said, "What did you make of the old guy, the general kind of thing?" And he was like, "Yeah, he was all right." I said, "You do know he was CG, don't you?" And he was kind of like, "Oh, all right, was he?"
It's
And he,
creepy as fuck.
yeah. So I kind of think it passed that uncanny valley test for a few people, but other people kind of like really kind of got creeped out by it and didn't like it, and it looked fake to them. So I don't know. I was in the camp that I thought it was completely convincing, but obviously it seems to have divided people on that. But um, that said, I remember going into Tron Legacy, when they de-aged Jeff Bridges for
Mm.
the Clue character, and I thought, oh, this is actually quite convincing. And then I went back because I actually like Tron Legacy. I still like it to this day, and I think the soundtrack actually adds to that film immensely. I think it makes it a great film, the soundtrack. Um, and it complements the actual themes of the story really, really well. But going back and watching what was bleeding edge kind of like technology at the time, having seen how convincingly they can actually de-age someone now specifically in the Marvel films, and how they can actually recreate people who've been dead 30, 40 years with what they did with Peter Cushing in Rogue One. It looks really bad. I do hold my hand up and I'm like that. This CG has not stood the test of time, and this film is not.
Yeah,
It's not an old film by any stretch of the imagination. It's not even 10 years old yet. So it is kind of staggering how quickly the technology is actually moving on.
definitely. And there was a trailer for some Will Smith shit when I went to watch that Angel Has Fallen, where he
The
basically
Gemini Man thing.
it's him against his 21-year-old self, and it's just there's certain elements of CG that I think work, and some that I think they're subtle, and some that hit you like in the face like a brick, and that was it.
Mm,
It just looked too smooth, too fresh,
yeah.
too smart, and that's where you start to wonder about it eating itself a little bit. Funny enough, I watched Rogue One last week, and I also watched Last Jedi and Force Awakens as well, and so I totally get your point about Tarkin and about Leia at the end of Rogue One too, when you've got the what has he given you? Given you hope. At the time, I thought, unbelievable. This is incredible. And now Rogue One's what, 4 years old, maybe
Yeah.
5 years old, perhaps. And technology's moved on so much that I've seen YouTube videos with more convincing deep fake facial recognition,
Yeah.
facial swapping tech than that. So
Yeah.
it just boggles the mind. It reminds me of going back to the days when not Godfather, Gladiator came out, and Oliver Reed passed away just before they'd finished the principal photography, and
Mm,
they did this unbelievably revolutionary face swapping technique there, which which now is 20 years old. So who's to say that in future you couldn't have a Princess Leia film where a solo film where they can just de-age Carrie Fisher's face and you can have a 21-year-old Princess Leia running around, in the vein of a Black Widow film and doing all this daring do. It opens up so many possibilities, and I imagine the families of these dead actors are loving it because they can start earning a little bit again.
Yeah, well, it's like I said to you on Facebook the other day. I'm sure their estates are actually, making deals now for the likeness
Absolutely.
rights in case someone does want to bring back Marilyn Monroe or Marlon Brando or Christopher Reeve. I was joking about another Superman film with Christopher Reeve, and it is a possibility. And
Of course it is.
someone in their own bedroom now has probably got a computer that is more powerful enough where they could actually, like you say, render a convincing, I wouldn't say 100%, but I would say like a good 90-95% convincing deep fake of some actors that sadly aren't with us anymore. So
Of course,
it's gonna be
the possibilities are endless.
yeah. I mean, it's getting into scary territory, but hopefully that kind of technology will be used for the right reasons as opposed to the scary wrong reasons. But
Never know, we might get that face off too that we've wanted all these years.
well, when you say we, I think you mean you. But yeah. Um, there was a tangent I did actually want to go. Yeah, that's where I was going. Speaking of stuff that kind of like is past its sell by date and shouldn't really come back, a la Terminator and that kind of stuff.
I hope you're not talking about me coming on the podcast again.
No, I'm not. I was actually going to go with the Dark Crystal. Have you watched any of that?
Right, no, I haven't yet. No, I've literally just a couple of days ago finished watching We Were Assassins on Netflix, which was my latest sort of series that I start with, and I have a funny sort of tradition, I guess, with Netflix series that I must persevere no matter how much I'm not enjoying it or how terrible it is. And unfortunately, We Were Assassins with the chap from The Raid is in the cheese factory sort of stakes
Right, okay.
have been rubbish. I love a bit of kung fu and the fighting scenes, yeah, no problem. But a lot of that series, it's 10 episodes of about 40 minutes each, something
Yeah.
like that. So it's a reasonable commitment to watch them all. It's really not worth your
Okay.
time. It's a load of mystical mumbo jumbo that ultimately doesn't really make much sense. Has some real sort of strange scenes in there with like different dimensions and things like that. A really
Right.
weird soundtrack that kicks in at bizarre moments with rap songs, with Chinese folk songs and things like that sometimes make the dialogue hard to hear.
Okay.
It's just a bizarre experience all round, and I wish I'd spent my time doing something more productive. But you're not alone in advocating Dark Crystal, because one of my friends at work has been talking about it this week and saying how good it is. So I'm
Yeah.
interested to know what you think.
Well, I think that I'll start off with what I don't like about it. I haven't finished it. I've still got like the last two episodes to go. What I don't like about it is it falls foul to the typical Netflix thing. It is too long, and I felt this with all of the Marvel Netflix shows. They've all been like 13 episode runs, and I've felt that they're 3 episodes too long,
Mm,
for the story that they're trying to tell. Then the Dark Crystal series is 10 episodes long, and even though
okay.
it's a prequel to the actual film, so you kind of know where the story is going to end off. How it actually gets there is actually quite interesting because there is an entire lore around Dark Crystal. The Dark Crystal didn't end at the end of that film. The fiction carried on, through books, comics, all different media. And they've actually done a great amount of research into all of the mythology that surrounds the Dark Crystal.
Is that like fan fiction and stuff like that, or how has that law
Actual,
come about?
actual, extended universe stuff.
Right, okay.
So
World building that.
yeah, so there's a lot kind of like happening in the show, which all makes sense. However, there are, I would say this would have benefited from being maybe 6 to 8 episodes. It still feels a little
Mm.
bit because the episodes themselves range from, again, like 45 minutes up to, some of them are touching, they're knocking on the door of an hour.
Yeah, it's too much, isn't it? I thought Lost in Space suffered from that as well because I quite enjoyed parts of Lost in Space,
Mate, I
but
couldn't get
again, it
past like
just
episode 3 or 4 because I thought
yeah, it
this
just
is meandering
dragged.
around and not really doing
Yeah,
anything for me.
and
So
I've heard the same about Jessica Jones series 3, which has put me off a bit
yeah,
because I thought series 2 was slow, but I've heard from people, from my mates, say that series 3 is even slower than
yeah,
series 2.
yeah.
So I'm not particularly excited until they bring Daredevil back. I think I'm making a one-man stand against Marvel Netflix shows.
I don't think you're getting anywhere with that, mate, because they're all dead and
Mm,
buried now, aren't they? So
it's a shame. I love Daredevil. I thought Luke Cage was decent at times, and I even had moments where I thought Iron Fist was decent as well. But
yeah,
Jessica
I didn't
Jones,
watch Iron Fist, and Luke.
yeah, it suffered.
Yeah,
Sorry, mate, go on.
I was just gonna say I only watched season 1 of Luke Cage because I thought it was okay. I didn't bother with season 2, so
Yeah, season 2 tread similar lines. But I thought Iron Fist was decent given the sort of the whitewashing controversy of it. I still felt like some of the fights in there were decent, and the overall story was pretty faithful.
mm.
If you can take out the fact that it was a kind of a completely different race playing the Iron Fist. But I enjoyed series 1 of Jessica Jones. I thought David Tennant was excellent in that
He made it. He really did
as
make it.
Kilgrave. Series 2 really suffered without that sort of familiar Marvel trope of a less than convincing main villain. And unfortunately, I don't think I'll be rushing to see series 2. I'll probably watch it at some point when I've
Yeah,
got nothing else to watch. But my Netflix list is creaking. There's so much stuff on there.
yeah. Which I just wanted to. I know I spoke to you about this off mic and said it was something that I wanted to bring up, but obviously with Netflix, clamoring for original content like The Dark Crystal, and they're bringing things in like Sabrina, the Teenage Witch back, and all that kind of stuff, going for original content and original programming, knowing full well that Disney is poised to launch its Disney Plus streaming service, which has got some really actually quite exciting shows
Mm,
lined up.
definitely.
Um, The Mandalorian looks fantastic.
We're only a
Um,
few weeks away from that. I think it's only about 6 weeks off coming out now, early November.
yeah, I'm absolutely like stoked for the Obi-Wan series, which
Ditto.
they
Yeah.
said that was going to be a film, and it was long gestated, and it didn't feel like it was going to go anywhere. And then lo and behold, we're actually getting Ewan McGregor back for an Obi-Wan series, which I can't wait for. So Disney Plus looks like it is something that people are going to be interested in, and people are going to be opening their wallets up because they want to watch this programming and this content. And that's not even looking at the Marvel stuff yet, because there's a number of Marvel shows been announced for it as well. But
Yeah, there's so much.
there's also Warner Brothers are spooling up, their own streaming service. It seems like every major Hollywood studio now on network are actually preparing to launch their own streaming service because Disney are pulling all of their stuff off Netflix. So if you
That's
want to
right.
watch a Disney film, you're not going to be able to do it on Netflix. You're going to have to pay the subscription to Disney Plus, and then Warner Brothers will invariably pull all of their films off Netflix and Amazon Prime as well. And it just seems like we're getting to the point now where, because all of these new streaming services are going to be launching, and every one of them is going to have a subscription with them, you're going to be paying, if you want to watch all of the content that you want to watch, you can't just go to one place anymore. Whereas like Netflix used to be the one place where you'd shell out your £8 a month or whatever, and you'd be
Yeah.
able to watch whatever you would not go hungry for something to watch on Netflix. You'd be able to find something that you wanted to watch, regardless of what studio made it, or who's in it or whatever. But now that they're all pulling their individual IPs back because they've realised that the Netflix model is actually really successful, and they all want a piece of that subscription pie, and they all want us to pay a tenner a month or whatever the price is going to be. It seems to me that is actually, greed taking over the industry once again,
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it?
and
It's
it's going to.
if you're gonna couple all that up with this, with a subscription to Sky or something like that at the same time. I mean, God, you could be looking 150, £200 a month for
Yeah,
all the content you possibly want. So it's no wonder people find their way to streaming sites and this and that and the other to get around that because it's just not practical. I think with the expense of modern life to then shell out even more for your
yeah,
entertainment. I think it's perfectly understandable why people do that, and that's certainly the path I trod because my Sky subscription when I first got my own house was I don't know £30 or £40 a month, dead basic. Up to a couple of years ago, it was touching £100 a month.
yeah,
and then since then, for the investment of probably about £100 in a decent Android box and a subscription IPTV service, I get everything I want. I get sports, movies, me wrestling. Mrs. gets the soaps. There's video on demand. Whenever there is anything that comes out on Netflix, that's
Yeah.
uploaded to a private Plex server that I've got access to from another guy. No doubt the Disney Plus and the Warner Brothers and the Amazon Prime stuff gets loaded up there too. And I think it's 50 or 60 quid a year for that IPTV service.
Yeah.
So it takes money out of the cinema, it takes money out of the studios. I'm fully aware of the consequences of what I do. I feel my own involvement in that I still like to go to the cinema, don't get me wrong, but that in itself is also an expensive process.
Of course
The
it
cinema
is.
near me, the cinema near me in Preston has had a full overhaul, and it's beautiful. It's got those nice reclining seats with a little table on. You can have your food, you can have a pint, you can have a glass of wine. It's a beautiful place to go, but it's 11 quid a ticket.
Yeah, it doesn't come for free. It doesn't come for free.
Absolutely, and the one in at the Trafford Centre and the one in Bury, it's a fiver, but it's not as smart and it's not as convenient as the cinema that's 2 minutes down the road from me.
Yeah.
So as much as I'd like to go to cinema more than I do, it's just not financially practical for me at this minute in time. And
It's
that's
not, and I know this podcast is all about a couple of lads having a chat about films and the movies that they love. However, this kind of behaviour from the big studios really fucking pisses me off because I do want to support the industry and I do want to do it the right way, but greed gets in the way. And like I say, when all of them are going to have their own streaming services now, and if you want to watch this, you have to subscribe to us, and you're not allowed to watch it over there, and this, that, and the other. It's the whole fucking Wall Street thing. Greed is good. Well, it's not good, is it?
absolutely.
It's just kind of, over the years, and you're probably exactly the same as me. I was stood in the line at the supermarket today, and I was thinking about, because I was just looking over at the Blu-ray section and the DVD section. I was thinking, how much money have I spent over the years on physical media? And I like physical media. I don't necessarily. Streaming is convenient. It's great. It is convenient. However, you don't get the best picture quality. You don't get the best sound. You only get that off physical media, because of the restrictions on bandwidth and compression and all that kind of shite.
Absolutely.
So I've always collected physical media, for the time. At one point, I had over 1,000 VHS tapes when I started, getting into movies big time. And then invariably that, VHS kind of like bit the bullet, and then it became DVD. I was, too young for the whole Laserdisc thing, but, DVD, that hit in a big bad way. And at one point, I probably had over 1,000 DVDs as well. I had shelves upon shelves.
I've been there. Absolutely been there too, mate. And it's only through time and through the necessity that I've streamlined that down to the point now where I think I've probably got about half a dozen, and I probably couldn't even tell you what they are really because I've not watched them for that long. They're just in a cupboard somewhere. Probably, I think I've got the remastered Star Wars. I've got the original uncut and the extended Lord of the Rings trilogies, and I think I might have a couple of animated DC films. I think, but I'd have to double check because. Physical media to me is the odd game on the PlayStation when the price of those becomes semi-reasonable, which is not very often. So yeah, I mean my entire movie going life, my movie consuming life is online. I got an email from my internet provider a while ago. It told me my annual usage, and it's like you're in the top like 8% in the country or something like that. So, but I'm not surprised because I stream shit every day. The kids watch YouTube every day. The missus watches Amazon Prime or she watches Netflix or this and that, and it's just the way that we live our life in our house. When I lived on my own before I got married and had kids, I was the same as you, mate. I had a big cabinet, a beautiful wooden cabinet with copies, duplicate copies, different cuts, different steel boxes, things like that. The full 9 yards.
Well, this is
and it was an addictive principle, and then ultimately you're flogging it for like 40p each to Music Magpie or something, and you just feel like, what was the entire point of that?
Well, this isn't a new practice with every studio wanting to milk their movies for all of the worth, because I mean you just said that you had different copies of the same films, so you double dipping on DVDs, that was a massive thing because I remember specifically me and Lee had conversations around The Evil Dead. around Evil Dead and Army of Darkness, because there was, I think, about 4 or 5 different versions of that film. All
Well, how
had
many
different
versions are there
cuts.
of Apocalypse now? There must be half a dozen, easy.
Well, there's another one coming out in the cinema because they have a
Exactly,
poster
and
up.
that's yeah.
There was a
It's
poster up
madness,
for it
isn't it?
today when I went and watched
It's
It Chapter 2. I was kind of like, oh,
it's
fucking hell, that's
complete
back in the
shameless.
cinema now. And then they had the
Complete
trailer
shame.
on when I went in and watched it. I was like, oh my god, another fucking version of it. And Blade Runner, you know. So I've probably got about... I've easily got a couple hundred Blu-rays here, and a couple of years ago, when I... This is going back to when I had an Xbox 360. I was one of the idiots who bought the HD DVD add-on for it because I was
All
hedging my
right,
bets between. I didn't
yeah.
know which one was going to win between Blu-ray and HD DVD when we had that format war. So I hedged my bets, and I had about 20 HD DVDs that I never got rid of after I bought the HD DVD player. So I went on eBay and I bought a job lot of about 100 and something HD DVDs with a new HD DVD player. So I've got a couple of hundred of them, you know, physical media as well. Some of them aren't even opened, you know. But it's over the years, I've probably spent tens of thousands of pounds on physical media, and then
Oh yeah.
to be gouged out on stuff that I'm not even going to own. You know, that's the thing about streaming. It's like you don't own it. You're just renting it in a way.
And is that what you like about it? Is it that physical? You can touch it. You know, you have to load. You have to take the effort to load it yourself, and you have to
Well, there's just
invest a
something.
little.
Yeah, I mean, as great as streaming is for the convenience of it, it's not the same as actually. I mean, there was something about actually putting a VHS into the VCR and actually hearing the spools up and all that kind of.
Mm,
And yeah, I mean, you worked at Warner's over in Pills with me. There was something great about walking through the actual projection booths, wasn't there?
definitely,
When
yeah.
everything was rolling around and all of the actual, you know, the celluloid was going through all of the rollers and going onto off one platter onto another. There's something. I just don't know how to describe it. There's just something inside me that is drawn to kind of like physical things like that. And yeah, there is the
Yeah,
collecting side of it,
tactile and
but there's also the kind of like the experience of actually, you know, putting a film on yourself, even if it is just putting a disc into a tray or something as simple as that. There's kind of a theatricality about it, and it
Do you
makes it a
still have
little
a,
bit
a
more.
VHS player, Mike, or if you amongst all your gadgets?
I don't have any VHSs. However, when I was over at my nan's, she still has a video player, which is up on the top in kind of like on in the storage space, and it hasn't been used in years, but I'm sure it works. But sadly, haven't got any VHSs to actually play them on because
I've kept one. I've
have
kept
you?
one up purely because I
In case
invested
the apocalypse hits and everything goes tits up with
just
discs
to
and
it's just to confuse the kids in case the Wi-Fi goes down one day and we're all knackered. We have to talk to each other.
yeah.
But it's because years and years and years ago, I was in the spate of buying old football videos. Bolton Wanderers had a famous commentator called Dave Higson who recorded, along with the club in the 80s and 90s, his
Yeah.
own commentary. He's passed away now. He was he's a bit of a cult hero amongst Bolton fans. Called Roadrunner Video, and it is basically like, you know, the odd match here from the 80s, a bit of a match from the 90s, but they were going for like 20 or 30 pound of VHS because they're so rare and they're collector's items. But I've still got my physical copies of the VHS. I've still got my VHS player on which to play them every now and then. But I've had them converted to DVD. You know,
Right.
so even that investment and that medium has become modernized because it's easier just to whack a DVD on than to nip up in my loft, get my VHS player, get a SCART lead, and this, that, and the other, and fanny around doing that. But you know, it's just nice to know it's there for one day.
Yeah.
Hopefully, one day.
Yeah. This, you know, this is how we used to do it back in the day. You can say that to your kids, can't you? I mean, look at cassettes.
Hey,
Audio cassettes are coming back now as well, aren't they? You know,
how
Walkmans
they
are actually
really?
coming back as well. So
Yeah.
that
Well,
whole
I had a
nostalgia
mini
thing is coming
disc.
back. So
I had a mini disc, which I thought at the time was cutting edge technology. I loved my mini disc player. But my daughter's 8. She's going on 9. You know, she likes gaming. She watches YouTube. She plays with me on Twitch from time to time. She'd be appalled if she had to listen to her music by not asking Alexa for it, having to actually physically go out and put a cassette or a CD in a player. She didn't even know where to start.
well, back in the day,
I mean,
my uncle was a pub and a club singer, and he used to record his tracks onto mini disc. So
right?
if you had a
Right.
mini disc player, you were obviously one of the posh kids. So,
This is
because
when I was a poor student. I think I must have got it for Christmas or something one year from my dear old mum. And yeah, but even that, you had to record it in much the same way you had to with your cassette, you had your mini disc recorder, and you could record off a CD or you could record off the radio, but you still had to physically be there and press pause at the right time.
yeah, all of these things are what kids are not gonna kind of like appreciate.
It's sad a bit, isn't it? That like you say, with streaming, the instant access culture. If I wanted to watch a film when I was a kid, it was a blooming enterprise, not a question of either switching the PlayStation on or switching your telly on and selecting your YouTube app from your smart TV that's connected to the internet and all this kind of carry on.
It's funny
It's a
because when I
faster
was
paced world.
it is definitely when I was in college, I did media studies. I went to Stan College in Whitefield and did media studies there, and we were talking about kind of like the future of media and how it was going to be consumed. And I don't know, I can't remember how the conversation got going or who had it, but the guy who was actually delivering the lecture or the class at the time, he actually called it. He said everything is going to go um, online, basically.
Mm.
Everything is you're going to be able to request a TV show that has not been on TV for 30 odd years, and you're going to be able to pull it up quick
Well,
as
you
you
know
like.
what?
And
It's as I mentioned, my friend with the Plex server earlier on. He has literally a service where you do that. He has a private WhatsApp group. Say, for example, I'll give you a proper example. A while ago, I was like, oh, if you ever get a chance, I really fancy watching some old episodes of The Bill, just because I used to
wow,
love it when I was a kid. And out of nowhere, I thought, well, I'll sack it. I'll see if he's got any. Anyway, he texts me back about 15 minutes later. I've just uploaded 865 episodes of The Bill to this Plex server.
Jesus,
And you know what? And that is a perfect encapsulation of what you've just said. That now that is true on demand at your fingertips
yeah.
entertainment, and you couldn't go out and find that anywhere else because it's been probably been cancelled for 10 years. The bill, there's no repeats anywhere. There's probably no DVDs or VHSs doing the rounds, even in the likes of CEX or Amazon or eBay. But all of a sudden, some fella wherever he lives, this guy I don't even know, I've never met him, but he's my go-to Plex guy. Within 15 minutes, had probably located half of the 25-year run of a long forgotten ITV series in England.
Jesus,
It's crazy.
that's mental. That is mental. Wow, the bill. Fucking hell.
Love the bill.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, we have witted on for a while. We've almost been going for an hour, and we haven't. I haven't even spoke about what I've been watching apart from the Dark Crystal. I'm enjoying the Dark Crystal. It's a little bit too long. It looks absolutely sumptuous. If you like the Dark Crystal, or if you like Jim Henson stuff, or if you like Labyrinth, go and watch it. It's on Netflix, and there you go.
It's on my list.
Yeah, I'm not even going to get it. I did go and watch it, chapter 2, but I'm not going to get into that. We'll save that one for another time. So yeah, let's just get into it. Because we've been wittering around for long enough.
Absolutely, let's crack on.
Now you're a big Nicolas Cage fan. I think it's fair to say. So
Yeah, partly self-aware irony involved in that, but legitimately at the same time, I struggle sometimes with actors these days, and I feel like a lot of them sort of blend into one. There's not a lot of risk taking. Granted, I'm saying that on the back of talking earlier on about being excited to watch the Joker film with Joaquin Phoenix in, but I feel like there's a certain group of actors, him being one of them, James Franco being in there as well, and the likes of Nicolas Cage, who maybe Jake Gyllenhaal as well, actually, given it the variety of work that he's been doing the last 10 years, both on stage and in cinema, that there aren't a lot of risk takers around necessarily, and I find sometimes that performance can compensate at times for a less than stellar script or a poor um, assembled co-cast, anything like that. And so yeah, my Nicolas Cage love, yeah, I do play it up because it is a bit cheesy, it is a bit naff, but I genuinely think there's not many actors out there, him, Ethan Hawke, like I said, Jake Gyllenhaal, James Franco, they'll just be in loads of stuff. I know Nicolas Cage has got reasons for that because of his stupid financial investments over the years.
yeah.
But the likes of Franco, Gyllenhaal, people of that ilk, they're just in stuff, just purely it seems for the love of it and the joy of it. And I find that variety means that Franco can do something like that. The film where he had the guy cut his arm off in that cave. But then he can
Oh,
also do
127 hours. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, he can also do his stoner films with his mates. And yet, then Franco's has got that back history of he also been in certain comic book films. But Nicolas Cage is an Oscar winner. He's not been necessarily been a joke his entire life, and a lot of the modern stuff he's done has been incredibly solid. In the last 5 or 6 years, I bet he's probably had out 50 films, and I'm not going to say by any stretch of the imagination they're all stone cold classics. But Mandy, for example, I don't know if many people have watched Mandy. It's a bumming, unbelievable psychedelic thriller of weirdness
Yeah.
with a little drop of horror in there, some romance in there, and incredible violence. I just think he's a man for all films, and I just wish that I think it's a bit of a shame really that he's become that kind of figure of fun a little bit, because I certainly don't think the quality of his work warrants that. And I think it's interesting that he's in this one with Travolta, who I guess not as prolific as Cage, I guess these days, but probably had some similar accusations thrown against him during his long career.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've kind of buried the lead there, but, when we were discussing about what we were going to actually talk about, we were initially talking about Batman, but I wanted to put it on back burner because Batman's quite a big film, and obviously I wanted to pay it the respect that it was kind of due, question mark. And then we went straight to Nicolas Cage, for some unknown reason. We were just kind of like drawn to him like a moth to the flame. And we both kind of said Face Off straight away. So this, for me, is easily one of his most enjoyable and most accessible films. Because, like you say, he has got quite a wide breadth to his his catalogue. He's done some really serious stuff. He's done some really out there stuff. He's done some really paychecky stuff. I think it's fair to say, like you alluded to his financial situations there, but you can't deny the guy as well. He's had his moments. He's had his fair share of moments as well, and
That's true.
like you say there, when he takes on a role, if there's something for him to chew, he will make a decision and he will fully commit, and he makes choices in his
That's
acting.
very fair to say.
Yeah, and he has done some really really good stuff. I mean, recently as well. Well, I say recently, it's actually longer than what I thought. It's about 10 years ago when he did Bad Lieutenant.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, isn't
that's
it?
one of the ones that comes to mind for me first too, because it's an unbelievable portrayal. I mean, I think that surpasses the Keitel original for me. Not to sort of give him any more credit than he's due, Nicolas Cage, due to the fact I do hold him in quite high regard, but I just think overall that's I don't know, it's a more visceral and more entertaining film than the Keitel version. I'm sure some
I
people will
think
disagree,
it's
but
more relevant as well. I think
mm,
just for the times, and we obviously grew up in a different time, to the Keitel one, but it just felt a little bit more relevant. The themes that it was
yeah,
dealing with.
definitely, definitely.
Maybe if we'd seen, if we were old enough to appreciate the Keitel one, and we'd probably feel a little bit different. But
Yeah, possibly, very possible.
it stands on its own. And it is, well, it's Werner Herzog. He's not really made anything bad, to be fair. He's made some
Soon
difficult.
to be seen in The Mandalorian as well. Let's not forget
I was
he's a man
shocked.
with a very diverse portfolio. Some of his, I mean, Grizzly Man. I must have watched that half a dozen times. In Nosferatu, everything that he's ever done with Bruno Gans is always worth watching. Very
Case
interesting
of
fella.
Forgotten Dreams is one of my
Yeah,
favourites. And then when he showed up in Jack Reacher, it was like, oh right, okay, interesting,
he's clearly just
interesting.
having a good time.
Yeah, well, he's got to that point now where he can actually enjoy himself a little bit, kind of. Even though he doesn't really show it, but he's obviously, if he's showing up in a Star Wars, production, he's having fun on some level. He's got to be having fun. Either that, or he's getting paid really, really fucking handsomely for it. So
But this one first came to my consciousness. I was 14 at the time, 97 it came out. Despite being sort of written, I think quite a few years ago but with Stallone and Schwarzenegger in mind. And I know we spoke about this quite a bit when the Lord of the Rings films were being discussed, how sort of sliding doors moments in casting history. You might have got Will Smith as Morpheus, or you might have got Sean Connery in there as well. But I think this works with the sort of almost like the knowing wink at the camera that these two guys bring to it. Arnie and Stallone, yeah, I think it wouldn't have been half as enjoyable for me. I don't know what you think.
No, well, it was written as being more of a futuristic sci-fi kind of film,
Mm,
wasn't it, with Stallone and
that's
Schwarzenegger attack.
right.
Although when I was doing a bit of digging into the actual film, I couldn't find any information as to who would take the respective roles out of it, Schwarzenegger and Stallone, as to who would be, Castor Troy character or the Sean Archer character.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a definitive version of that.
No, so I could only think that they would probably play against type and have. Um, well, it's difficult to say because. Well, let's look at it.
I think they would have both.
Schwarzenegger has played a villain, hasn't he? So, just looking at it from that point of view, Schwarzenegger's played a villain in the fact that he played the Terminator.
Yeah,
Even though they subverted it pretty quickly in Terminator 2 and made him the hero. But he did at least play a villain once in his career. But up until that point, I'm struggling to think of a film where Stallone had played a villain. Even
yeah,
as to now, I
anti
mean, has he?
an anti-hero, yeah, loads of times, but a true villain, not so many, not that come to mind straight away. Anyway, I think they probably both would have done it equally poorly. I think that's probably the only thing we can maybe be sure of.
Yeah, especially back in '97, they weren't known for their acting chops, were they? So
No, not by
no,
any stretch of the imagination.
no.
But yeah, it's that interesting. One thing I never realised until I did a little bit of research as well. This was the first ever Blu-ray that Paramount put out. I thought that was quite an interesting little fact, which I found in my research. I had absolutely no
Ah,
idea about that whatsoever. Yeah, 2008 when they got into HD DV, a little bit like you, mate. First of all, but then as the tide turned, they moved over to Blu-ray along with Next and B Movie. Bit of Jerry Seinfeld in there.
right,
But yeah,
okay.
that was quite interesting.
Well, the
Only
version
only
of
11
the
years.
Blu-ray that I've got actually comes up with Buena Vista on it. It doesn't have
All right.
Paramount on it, so. But I think Buena Vista did the international side of things, whereas Paramount
Right, I'm
probably
with
did
you.
the American one because Buena Vista was. I don't know if it's still going or not, but that was a Disney. Um, so technically, this is
Yeah,
a
I can't
Disney
remember
film.
last time I saw a Buena Vista production, but I watched this on YouTube, funnily enough. It was the first time I think I've ever watched a full movie on YouTube. I thought it was just for cats and videos of kids taking toys out of boxes, but yeah,
Yeah.
it was on YouTube. Very, very
Well, I had
interesting. Well, the
to because all
picture
of my
quality was
discs were
shocking.
packed up, for the house move. So I had to
Mm.
dig this out and actually find it, and then I've just put the Blu-ray on in the background now so I can watch it. And it's interesting because I suppose I should pretty much give an outline as to the story. So we've got two characters, one played by Nicolas Cage, Castor Troy, who is a drug dealer, bad guy, murderer, rapist.
Terrorist, don't forget as well, was planting bombs
Yeah.
in downtown LA.
And we've got John Travolta's Sean Archer, who is an FBI agent, who, in the opening scene, is on a merry-go-round in the middle of a fucking field, and Castor Troy casually just lies down on a field with a massive, sniper rifle and tries to assassinate Sean Archer. So they've obviously got some history because he wants to kill him straight from the off.
Sporting a
Um,
terrific moustache as well, may I say.
it is a cracking 90s porno stash, isn't it?
I
I
think
was
it's got to be some sort of Charles Bronson tribute or something. That
I was
it's
actually when I
you
when I was
know
rewatching this film, I was hoping. Well, I wasn't hoping, but I was kind of like pondering on the fact. I was just kind of like, oh, what a missed opportunity. I wish he had that tash all the way through the fucking film. It would have taken on a
right
whole
enough.
different kind of, you know. Um,
There certainly aren't enough mustaches in films this day. Never mind 1997.
there's not. We need a new Burt Reynolds, don't we? We need a Burt Reynolds for the time. So someone who can actually rock a tash like that. But yeah, he tries to shoot Archer on the merry-go-round, who's on the merry-go-round with his son. He's not just there on his own, but and he misses. He shoots through him and then shoots his son in the head. So that kind of sets up the dynamic between the characters, and then the film cuts to however many years later, and it's literally the opening kind of like scene. The opening chase takes place in a plane with a jeep, then in an airport hangar with a jet engine, and This
on the
is
longest runway, I think, other than one of the Fast and the Furious films where they're on a runway for about 15 minutes on that one.
yeah,
It's not quite as long on this one, but yeah, that's an absolutely massive runway. That again, it must go on
it's
for about 10 minutes.
it does go on for a fair while, and they're both coming at each other. So they're playing chicken with a plane and a jeep, and it's kind of like this is the kind of scene that you would expect at the end of an action film in the '90s, not at the beginning. So it sets its
Yeah,
stall out pretty early, because this is directed by John Woo, and for people who don't know, he was quite well known back in the '90s for directing um, action films, specifically Hong Kong action with Chow Yun Fat. He did quite a few films with him. He did like Better Tomorrow,
I
Hard
think that's the one that
Boiled.
probably most people know, and Hard Boiled as well. Just you've just mentioned them would be the one that I first came to my attention, and so many of the familiar tropes that he has in that particular one that became his own,
Yeah,
distinctive visual style he re-employs through Face Off as well, which again is something that you don't see that much of these days. I don't suppose there'll always be directors who'll do certain things. The J.J. Abrams with his lens flare, and slightly funny things like that. But to actually have repetitive scenes and physical points of view and things like that he puts in there,
yeah. He's got a lot of
I
like
just I really
visual.
enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Loads of flourishes like that.
yeah, lots of motifs like with he was well known for the doves and kind of like the dual pistol wielding, theatrics,
Yeah,
gunplay,
reflections
and
of people's eyes and glasses and things like that. There's plenty in there in that regard that he brings to the table, and I think it elevates it from just your average sort of cop and robber fare to something a little bit more arty. Let's not pretend it's high art by any stretch of the imagination, but it at least makes the effort to come across as something a little bit more thoughtful, even
yeah,
if at times it can drag that out a little bit, as I think the running time maybe attests to. It's perhaps a bit of a longer one, I think. Longer than I remember it being anyway, over 2 hours.
100%. I remember you messaged me after watching it, and you were like, I was
Mm,
shocked at how long this film was, and I
yeah.
was like, oh yeah, I thought I had kind of like memories of this being like a solid 90-minute actioner, where there wasn't much fat on it, but this film is over 2 hours. I was,
Yeah,
you know,
it's a long one.
when I went back and rewatched it, I was like, holy shit, this is actually quite a long film.
Yeah.
And even though it does have a kind of like an out there premise, basically, you know, upon capture, Castor Troy's put into a coma, but he's planted a bomb at the start of the film, and Archer has to undergo a surgical procedure to swap faces to actually go undercover to find out where the bomb is by interrogating his Castor Troy's brother, who's in a really weird supermax kind of prison. Um,
All wearing the same boots as they wore on Super Mario Brothers as well. His little
yes, yeah. So this is such a high tech kind of prison that they're all walking around in
big
magnetic
magnetic boot.
boots, because that's how they roll in in maximum security prisons apparently. Um,
I think that must have been a layover from the fact that initially when it was written, it was set in the future. Like we
yeah,
said, it had its sci-fi
it had a
sci-fi
very
origins.
fortress feel to it, and that's probably the one and only time actually going to reference a Christopher Lambert film. But yeah, that one's for you, Andy Godoy, if you're listening. But yeah, it felt very fortressy to me. Um,
Definitely, definitely. Even with the weapons they were using, the motifs as well in there, and the fact that even for authenticity, I read somewhere that John Woo had brought in actual former convicts as well to make sure it really did come across
oh,
that. I
did
mean,
it
that is
now? Wow.
that is quite a high concept when you're talking about this kind of movie, but it all adds to the fact that this is one of those films that yeah, it's 20 years old, and yeah, the premise is a bit naff, but it's just fun, I think, as well. And if you can get beyond the extended running time, it does pass fairly quickly. It doesn't
It
really
does,
sag
yeah. I
that
mean, it
doesn't
moves
really
at a
sag
fair
that
clip.
much.
There is a bit where it kind of sags in the middle, where like it's becoming clear that Castor Troy, who comes out of his coma and has Travolta's face pasted on him, and is kind of like masquerading around as Sean Archer, with Sean's actual wife. That and then
Mhm.
she's starting to come around to the fact that something's not quite right here. That is the only bit of the film that I felt was baggy when I was rewatching it.
I did think the same, that it was, it's an interesting wrinkle to it. Yeah, oh, well, she's sleeping with Nicolas Cage, but it's really not a husband that she thinks it is. Whether that could be hinted at and not shown, it might have trimmed 15 minutes or so off. It wouldn't have been the end of the
Yeah,
world.
yeah. I think they probably put that in there to balance it out, though, because another thing that kind of struck me when I was going back to watch this film is like, when the characters have swapped roles with each other, so Cage is now the good guy and Travolta's now the bad guy, and they're in the middle of it. The film, you touched upon it a minute ago when you said there was something a little bit more to it, a little bit more meat on the bones. The film is asking you to sympathise with the bad guys a lot more than what it does with the good guys.
Yeah, the
Um,
characters that surround Castor when he's in his cage form. The Nick Cassavetes and Gina Gershon, the weird brother and sister dynamic they have. That the poor
that
little
is,
kid
yeah. Well,
that's in there as well.
let's just get to that a
There's
bit. I
just
mean,
so much going on behind the scenes.
when they're having the iconic kind of like shoot off in that apartment, and they're facing each other through the mirror kind of thing, and he actually shoots Nick Cassavetes in the neck. When he's telling his sister Gina Gershon, who is fucking gorgeous in this film, by the way,
You know,
when he's telling her to kind of like take the kid and run, he kisses her full on the lips, and they're supposed to be
yeah,
brother and sister. I was like, what the?
yeah.
Hang on, what? What?
That's not a goodbye peck, is it? That's
No, no. I
you
mean,
got to wonder whether he just fancied his chances on the day.
he probably did. He just thought, well, this is my one and only shot. I'm gonna fucking slip her a little bit of tongue here, because that lingered a little bit too long for me. I was kind of like a little bit uncomfortable watching that. I was like, oh, okay, I don't really, because that, never really thought about it before, and I was like,
Yeah, no,
oh,
it's just another little wrinkle to a film that's on the surface, like I said, your bog standard cop and robber film, but there's just so much going on. I mean, even doing a bit of research into behind the scenes of it, there's hundreds of things that people have written over the years about this film. There's so much trivia
yeah,
that we could be here all day otherwise. But I just find that there's something, like I say, it's a high concept, but ultimately it does come down to that, almost like a family tale, doesn't it? Because Sean Archer's got his family, which is falling apart at the start because they've obviously lost the little boy to the actions of Castor
yeah,
back
and
in the
his
day.
his daughter's kind of like struggling with her kind of
Yeah,
like,
she's rebelling, and he doesn't know how to deal with it, and he can't really have much of a relationship with his wife because he's so caught up in getting revenge. But then Castor's got his own family as well with Pollux and like I say with Sasha and I can't remember what Nick Cassavetes' character's called now, but yeah, Gina
Dietrich.
Gershon being Sasha and Dietrich. There you go. Their sort of dynamic as a family, as a dysfunctional family, of course, with the little boy in there as well, is just as interesting. So I think someone like John Woo brings a lot to that. Whereas I think in the hands of, I don't know, like a Michael Bay or someone like that, or name me another sort of mid-90s action director, or probably with Wesley Snipes in there instead of Nicolas Cage, it wouldn't have had the same kind of punch, I think, and that maybe is why this kind of film does linger in the memory and it does retain its place in my heart, because ultimately it might have that high concept and ultimately be a shootout, but at least it tries to be something a bit different.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because like if you kind of like, it's an action film and it's a 90s action film, but if you were to come and tell me that Nick Cage was actually, going back to the honeymoon in Vegas kind of days, or the Moonstruck days, or the earlier Nick Cage, if you said he was going to end off being an action star, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here.
Mm-hmm.
But this is on the back of kind of like The Rock, which is only kind of like reminded me because you mentioned Michael Bay, and obviously The Rock is probably Michael Bay's best film for me, or at least the least.
At least Michael Bayish.
Yeah, the least distasteful film that is made, shall we say. Actually, tangent. Just before we started recording, I was on YouTube and I saw. Have you seen the trailers for Bad Boys 3?
I have, and I must say, I've not. It doesn't drag me in. I've seen the first one, but I don't particularly like Will Smith. I don't particularly like Martin Lawrence. Um, which is, you know, it is a curious one given the area in which I grew up in. But no, tell me your thoughts, mate. I'm interested to know what you
Oh
think.
my, it just looks shite. It's just kind of like these guys are too old, they're too fat to be doing this shit. And throwing a line in there where one of them says, I'm retiring, that is not enough to make up for the fact that these guys are
No,
clearly past it and should not be doing this kind of film anymore.
absolutely not.
So,
Absolutely not.
and
That just harks back to, like you said before, about your Terminators and this and that. It's a coin grab, isn't it? From
yeah, it's
Will
two
Smith. Will Smith's
years, it's
clearly
two
doing
years
Martin
too
Lawrence a
late.
favour.
It's just 2 years, 10 years too late, not 2 years, 10 years too late. I mean, when was Bad Boys 2? That must have been 2006.
God knows, but it's probably the first thing Martin Lawrence has done since. Like I say, he's probably just maybe needs a few quid, and his old mates come back and giving him a bit of a leg up.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Are you disregarding Big Mama's house?
I'm disregarding Big Mama's house and probably Big Mama's house 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, which no doubt exist as well as Lawrence tries to get the bills paid.
Yeah, I remember after Bad Boys came out, didn't he do something where he was, what was it? I just remember a poster of
Was
him
it
like,
for? It was a night, wasn't he? Was it first night or something? I can't remember now.
no,
But he
where
played.
he
Was he
had a
not in that?
gun, national security. It was, yeah,
Ah, okay.
it was kind of like the poster was like him holding a gun in like a very Bad Boys pose, but there was no Will Smith next to him,
I
so
was
it was
going to
kind of
say
like
they
this is
couldn't
yeah,
afford
yeah.
they couldn't afford to cut the co-star.
So
But
I
speaking
saw,
of co-stars in this particular one, Alessandro Nivola has always been a curious actor for me. I think I've seen him more in Soccer Aid on ITV playing football than I've seen him in movies. But I thought he was quite good in this. He played that kind of whiny,
he's got
kind
that
of
kind of yeah.
semi sort of on the spectrum kind of a baby brother that needs an older brother to help, but obviously has got a part to play in himself with him being
He's
the
got some
the,
very
the
kind of like
mind behind
weird
the bomb.
facial, weird vocal tics and kind of like weird physical tics where there's just this little scene where he's like, bye, bro. And he's waving, but he's only using his pinky finger to wave.
Well, there's a really interesting documentary, and it's called Crumb. I don't know if you've ever seen it before. There's an artist called Robert Crumb, and I remember seeing it a long, long, long time ago. And I was going to watch it again after I did a bit of research. But there's an interview I saw on YouTube with Alessandro Nivola, and he said that he copied the mannerisms and the speech patterns of Charles Crumb, who's the
Ah.
brother of this artist in this documentary. So it's a bit of a boring documentary, so I wouldn't recommend necessarily checking it out. But that wasn't as written. He introduced that quirk to the character, and I think it works really, really well to make him quite vulnerable. But I think he does have a hidden depth to him. I think as well,
Mm.
which maybe wouldn't have come across first time around had he not had that little addition of that of those mannerisms and those ticks.
Yeah, I was actually quite struck as well. I mean, it probably makes sense with what you just said about him showing up on Soccer Aid there and that. But he was, I think he still is. I think he's married to Emily Mortimer.
Mm.
Um, who, well, I mean, the first thing that I remember her from was the 51st State, which was a film with
Yeah, she's
Samuel L.
done lots,
Jackson
hasn't
and
she?
Robert Carlyle.
She's in V for Vendetta and Minority Report. No, so that's Samantha Morton, isn't it? I'm getting that mixed up. But yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how someone like that, you feel like paths cross. I know one that always is always curious to me is John Krasinski and Emily Blunt, and then
Mm,
the likes of Dave Franco and Alison Brie. It's curious, isn't it? These people that get sort of drawn together from different worlds. In
Alison
all
Brie, you've
this,
just reminded me of Glow as well on Netflix.
well,
What a show that
what a
is.
woman.
Oh,
That that always irritates me because I find Dave Franco to be quite probably one of the most annoying people on planet Earth, and to find the fact that he's married to someone like Alison Brie an absolute personal insult.
yeah.
It really winds me up how he's done that. It's
It,
just
it,
this
it
disgrace.
yeah, it's one of those kind of like crimes of humanity, but good for him. Good for him. So,
But even in this one, I thought Joan Allen. Obviously, it's nearly 25 years old, this particular film, but she's always been an interesting one over the years. I know I guess apart from this, I've probably seen her most in the Bourne series.
yeah.
But what do you think about her in this, Mike? Because I thought she was really good, and she played vulnerable, and at times she played strong as well when she had to be for a family. I mean, she's a
Um,
cracking act. She's a cracking actress. I don't think she's ever really not been
I
in
think
anything. But I'm
I think
curious to know
by
what you thought.
pulling her into it, she kind of like she gives the film a little bit more credence than what it's actually due, considering
Definitely,
the actual,
gravitas.
considering, like you say, the premise of the film is, ridiculous in the extreme. But by casting people like Joan Allen in there, and it's a solid cast. You got CCH Pounder in there as well.
Yeah,
She's never bad, even though she's been in some bad shit. She's never bad. By casting like decent, good actors and actresses, or whatever the politically correct term is nowadays, in those surrounding roles, it adds a more kind of like grounded realism to the film, regardless of the more ridiculous aspects of the story that's going on there. She's a little bit undersold, but because the film doesn't really give her much to work with, but what she is there to do, she does really, really well.
definitely, definitely, and I think part of that is for John Woo, given that his previous films, I guess, were they were Hard Target and Broken Arrow, which are just ridiculous. I guess it is having more control over the script in this case, and more control over things that he complained about quite a lot with Hard Target, with the studio interference, allowed him to introduce that, because I guess that would maybe have been something that he'd been more used to with his Hong Kong sensibilities. In when you can produce Hard Boiled is a balls out action film, but it's also got those sort of family moments in there as well.
Yeah.
And someone like Joan Allen's perfect, because like you say, she does bring some sort of like a sort of dignity and a strength, and like I said, a bit of gravitas in there as a proper sort of inverted commas actress.
Yeah.
You're not going to get much else out of someone like Dominique Swain playing the daughter, but Joan Allen can do pretty much anything you want her to do. Hence her confusion and her growing understanding and concern when she does start, I think,
Yeah.
to realize that things are not quite as they should be.
Yeah, she plays it straight when everything else around her is, I mean, I've seen a couple of articles which describe the film between Cage and Travolta as like the overacting Olympics, and it really is. When they're both in full swing, they are, trying to act each other off the.
When you just get big as you can, and then if you can't do any bigger than that, then just go a bit bigger anyway.
Yeah, but that's what makes the film fun. Seeing these two guys really dial it up to 11 and trying to outdo each other, and they're not. And the thing that keeps it fun is that they're not trying to outdo each other in a way that makes one or the other look bad. They're just having fun with it.
Well, yeah, and by sort of diametrically opposing one another, they're having to, by their own performance, emphasize the performance of the other. Because I did a bit of reading in the background of things, that they spent 2 or 3 weeks living
together. Yeah, that's right.
Living together to learn one another's mannerisms, and I think that really comes over well, because I think it is a convincing portrayal of one another when they do finally change. To the point as you've got the John Travolta character making fun of the way he looks.
Yeah.
As John Travolta,
Well,
what do you think I should do with this ridiculous chin? And
on the IMDb page, there's actually, I don't know if it's true or not, because obviously people can go in and edit that, but there is on the trivia section on there. Apparently, he took exception to that. He thought the writers were taking the piss, but everything I've heard up to that point of actually reading that suggested that was something that he was on board for, and actually he kind of was.
Yeah, a bit of
okay
self-deprecation from John Travolta, because they made that joke a couple of times when they're working through the computer program of how he'll look when he's converted. They make a comment about getting rid of the love handles and the hairline and things like that, which provokes a bit of a wry look from Travolta. Which I think you've got to be in on the joke, and you've got to be able to mock yourself a little bit when the role that you're taking on is literally the transformation of you into somebody else.
I can kind of believe that Travolta did have an issue with that, because he is someone that has, up until this point, been quite in the closet, so to speak, about his appearance.
Yeah, a bit vain.
Yeah, to the point where it's been reported that he had an entire room filled with wigs and toupees. And
his hairline is a most interesting thing.
Yeah, well, there's been. I remember a couple of years back, there was like, he showed up in Paris on the red carpet for this, that, and the other, and he had a full head of hair, and then the next day he flew somewhere else, to another red carpet event, and he had a completely different hairstyle. which it was obviously two different wigs, but
I'm sure there's a rational explanation for that.
I'm sure there is. But he's embraced it now because if you go on his Instagram, which is very fucking cringy by the way, but he's one of those celebs that kind of like are a little bit out of touch. He's probably been famous for so long that he doesn't really know how to
Right,
kind
so
of present
it is.
himself in social media, so it's a little bit cringy if you go on his Instagram.
I'll have to check. I'll have to check it out. I can well imagine that that he maybe takes himself a bit too seriously.
Yeah, but he's embracing the fact that he's bald now because there are he's just shaved his fucking
Ah,
head.
okay,
So and
good for him.
yeah. I'd made that decision a couple of years back. It's kind of like shit's going thin up top, just fucking get it off instead of going through the indignity of having to have a bit of a Bobby Charlton going around. You just
Oh, Mike, I'm sure whatever hairdo you choose, you'll still be a very beautiful man to me.
oh
Um, what can I say? Yeah,
thanks.
it's just one of those moments I think as well. As the film sort of progresses, the action kind of obviously it continues, but it doesn't really beat. I don't think that peak from the opening scene. I don't know what you think, but it
Well,
struggles.
it
I think
starts
sometimes
strong,
to
doesn't it? It starts very strong. Like I say,
exactly.
that scene is kind of like a climactic kind of scene in any other film.
Yeah, and it almost suffers as a result. I think a little bit. And yeah, of course, there's moments of action and really enjoyable action as well. But even the finale, I think, as well with the boat chase, I don't find it to be as quite as exciting as the start of the film. I don't know what
I'd
you
probably
think.
agree with you. Yeah, I think that the actual standout action scene is the shootout in the apartment in the middle of the film. I think because all of the stakes are there, and you've got the scene which is what was I going with that? Oh yeah, the Over the Rainbow. You've got the music playing around that where
Oh, the little boy, yeah.
he puts the headphones on the kid and and like I said before, they're facing each other in the mirror and then they shoot each other in the mirror, which is obviously not too subtle, visual kind of themes going on
That's
there.
it. Whacking
Um,
you over the head with symbolism.
yeah, but I think all of the action apart from there's one kind of set piece where I would say that's where the film kind of falls down action wise is the bit in the church towards the end.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
didn't seem to quite know how to because it's like a Mexican standoff. All of the main players at that point are pointing guns at each other, and then everyone starts shooting, and it's just shots of bullets coming out of the barrel of different guns, and cut to another weapon and another bullet coming out of the barrel of that gun, and it's just cross cut between all of these guns firing, and you maybe get a one somersault off Nic Cage where he has both the guns in his hand, and then that's it. It's the shootout's over and done with, and then they're on a foot chase, and then they're on the boats, and that bit in the church is the weakest for me. I do like the boat chase. I think that's pretty cool, and okay, let's address the elephant in the room. There's zero fucks given to hiding the use of stuntmen in this film.
no, I think that is on a par with the early James Bond films. I think for the fact that your stuntman has got pretty much a different build, a slightly different skin tone, and not even trying to be close
Yeah,
to the same sort of hairstyle. It's almost blooming Planet of the Apes bad
it,
in the latter Planet of the Apes
they
where they
might as
clearly
well
only
just
gave
have
the monkey
big,
costumes to the guys on
yeah.
the
Oh
front
my
row.
god, yeah. They might as well just have big neon signs pointing, going ding, stuntman. Because there's absolutely no care or attention given. This is probably the most egregious use of blatant stuntmen since Arnold Schwarzenegger's stunt double in True Lies when he's running away from the guards in
Yeah,
the opening sequence.
I think you're probably right. It's one of them, isn't it, where I understand they're going to be used. Then this day and age, you could probably make it look totally seamless. But 20 years ago, yeah, put a bit of effort in, mate. Come on.
Yeah, just use a more selective camera angle here, just to hide them and not have the face showing. But I was again when I was doing my little bit of research on this film. Apparently, there is there's not much CG used in this film, but there is a facial replacement on one of the stuntmen for Nic Cage. And
Is it when they do that weird like wire foo sort of
mate, I'll be
back
fucked if I
flippy
can
type
find it
thing?
because I couldn't see anything that was. Every time I saw what was I thought was a stuntman, it was quite clearly a stuntman. So wherever this
Mm.
fucking CGI facial replacement is in this film, I can't find it. So
I would imagine it's probably that the bit I'm thinking of is where they all get pulled up and obviously they're on wires and what have you. Maybe there's a
yeah,
little bit of digital replacement in here. But one thing I wanted to ask you, I know we're sort of going through this not in a particularly structured manner, but I prefer that.
yeah.
How do you think this compares with Con Air? Because I
Well,
only never realised this at the time. They came out like 2 weeks apart, 3 weeks apart, maybe something like that.
was it that
It was a
close?
proper, yeah, like June and July 1997. Um, just a matter of weeks.
Shit, you're
How do
right.
you
Yeah. So according to this,
how do you
Con Air
think it
came out on the
compares?
6th of June, and Face Off came out on the 27th of June.
Yeah, 3 weeks later. It's mad.
Oh.
I mean, I think these two are up there in the sort of pantheon of Cage accomplishments in his sort of earlier career. But I'm interested to know what you thought about the two. If
Well,
you were
that's
at
kind of where I
gunpoint forced
was.
to choose, where would you go?
Yeah, well, that's where I was kind of going to go when I was saying, if you told me Nic Cage was going to end off being an action star, I would have told you to go get fucked. But you see the physique that Nic Cage actually put on for his role as uh, what's his Cameron Poe is his
Cameron Poe, it was.
Cameron
Yeah, that's
Poe.
right. Supposed
Uh,
to be a former Marine or something, wasn't he?
yeah, with a really ridiculous. He's got a terrible hairline in that film.
Ah,
I know.
it makes for a brilliant gift though, whether it's just lightly blowing in the air. It's just was sumptuous.
Yeah, but I mean, you can see why when you see his physique. Um, I mean, he's still kind of got it in Face Off. He's still kind of a built dude in there, but in Con Air, he was jacked in Con Air, and
Yeah, he's a tall guy as well.
you can see why Tim Burton wanted him for Superman off the back of that.
Hmm.
Um,
That's something as well. I've always meant to ask you, and I'm just going to take the opportunity. Have you seen The Death of Superman Lives, the
yes,
documentary?
yeah,
Right, I'm pleased you said that. What an
yeah.
absolutely brilliant thing. Then anyone that's listening that hasn't seen that, whether you're interested in Superman, you're interested in anything, movies in general, failed movies, name your poison. That's a really interesting film documentary. I highly recommend that anyone that's not seen that, which goes into a real deep dive into that failed Superman film
And just made by a
from the
fan
late
as
90s.
well. Just
Sensational.
made by a fan.
Yeah.
Took it upon himself to fund it, go out there, arrange the interviews, and do a real deep dive into it. And it is one of the most fascinating documentaries
Absolutely.
about a film which never happened that you'll ever watch. So yeah, go and watch it. I think you can probably. I think I watched it on YouTube.
It's it's everywhere. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's great. I mean, it's interesting that with the films coming being available on YouTube in this day and age, you'd have thought that companies would be cracking down on the copyright piracy and what have you, especially in the streaming age where there's nothing like that going on. But to find movies available on YouTube, I thought was a curious quirk.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got a VPN set up so I can watch kind of like the American
Mm.
Netflix, and it works on YouTube as well. And there's full licensed movies on YouTube, on American YouTube,
Yeah,
um, which
it's
you
interesting.
which you can watch as long as you're happy to watch, the odd YouTube ad in the middle of it. So
It's
um,
not a bad payoff, is it?
it's not. I mean, I remember telling you the other day in Messenger that I'd watched Buckaroo Banzai on that, and
Mm.
because that's not an easy film to get hold of. If you want a decent copy of it, and it's on YouTube in high def, and you just have to sit through a couple of ads. So yeah, that's another one of those kind of cult classic films that's worth a watch as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, but yeah, Nick Cage in Con Air. It's. I think I watched it a few too many times. I remember going watching that at the cinema at least 3 or 4 times with different people. And I remember buying it on VHS back in the day, and then watching it to death on that because it's a really kind of like enjoyable film, but I think it's a little bit more general audience friendly.
Yeah, it's not got its origins in the kind of I know this was portrayed to be a sci-fi film once upon a time, but I still think it retains certain, obviously retains some of the fantastical elements. What with the old face swapping thing, and yeah, I'd probably say Con Air is maybe more of a traditional by the numbers action movie, but
Yeah,
both excellent in their own right, and both worthy of a rewatch, even now
and
20 odd
that's
years
got
later.
John Malkovich chewing the scenery in that one.
Never, yeah,
So
arguably never better.
yeah,
He's
with
fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Steve Buscemi putting in kind of like a very kind of weirdly menacing put, performance as what's his name, Garland Green.
Good. God knows, I'm about to your superior memory on that front.
I'm
But
I just remember the scene where like someone says, "Oh, he drove through like 5 states wearing a woman's head as a hat," and then he's kind of like all dressed up like Hannibal Lecter and stuff. So yeah, and Dave,
yeah,
extra points for Con Air because Dave Chappelle's in that as well. So
Dave Chappelle, of course, yeah, and early John Cusack as well, taking things on. There's quite a few interesting people in the background of Face Off as well. I thought, I don't know, as we sort of whizzed through things a little bit, but Thomas Jane was in there as well. At one point, one of the henchmen, Tommy Flanagan as well, who's in millions of different things.
yeah.
John Carroll Lynch, who was in Zodiac, played one of the suspects in Zodiac as well. There's
Well,
quite a
if
few things.
if you- if you
Chris
watched
Bauer as well.
Zodiac, he was quite clearly the killer. Never mind
Yeah,
a
yeah,
suspect.
that's
So
Robert Grayson's favourite for it, most definitely.
Thomas James. So was that the guy with the Burke Hicks in the prison?
Yeah,
Who he
exactly. Yeah,
calls
so
I was wondering when I was watching that, but Thomas Jane now looks like he's aged 30 years in the past 5.
he's a curious guy, Thomas Jane. He's never quite got the sort of leading man chops, has he? Though, even though he's done quite a few different things, all with Punisher,
Yeah,
Spider Man, countless other things, and The Mist. I've never really been completely taken with him as a leading man. Unlike, funnily enough, just to sort of drag it back to the subject in hand, but Nicolas Cage, who I find is that kind of chap. You know, he's done the romantic films in his youth. He's done action films. He's done thrillers. He's done psychological ones. He's done dramas. You know, more or less anything you can think of. He's laid his hand to. Thomas Jane, I find a little bit more one dimensional than that. He's not quite that. He's just like a bit of an everyman, and never really stands out too much.
yeah.
Hence, you maybe never even noticing him before.
Well, I thought, is that him? And then he was kind of like, gone after a bit, and then it was the scene kind of shifts focus onto the Dubov character because him and Cage have that fight, and again that's another kind of example with the Dubov character where you meant to feel he's obviously a bad guy because he's in prison, and he's in the maximum security prison with Sean Archer's Castor Troy. Um, and he dies saving Sean Archer.
Yep.
Well, kind of saving. And you meant the way it's framed with the music and the way that Sean Archer's actually trying to save him. He's portrayed very sympathetically there, and you're like, hang on, I'm supposed to feel sympathy for this acknowledged bad guy.
Yeah, the subversion of predetermined expectations, and that
There's a
is
lot of that
obviously
going on
a
in this
theme that's
film. Yeah,
yeah, definitely. It's not only the main characters that switch identities. I think a lot of the audience's response to those main characters is also expected to change over the course of the couple of hours.
I think that's what makes
And
this film a kind of cut above the usual action film.
100%
Yeah,
agree.
because it's not
100%
something
agree.
that I expected. I mean, I've never really considered it in those terms until I actually went back and rewatched it. I'm kind of like, the film is manipulating me into a position where I'm supposed to feel sorry for this guy who is falling to his death, even though he's a bad guy. But he's a
Yeah,
bad guy
well
that helped
that's
our
it.
good guy who looks like a bad guy, so he wasn't knowingly helping the good guy. He thought he was helping
that's
the bad
that's when you get
guy.
that's when you get lost in a whirlwind of what ifs and potentials, isn't it? When you start
Yeah.
considering all the timeline eventualities and contradictions and things, you really truly end up in a sort of Back to the Future paradox of
Yeah, I
how could this
really shouldn't be
possibly
thinking
happen.
about these things in a big dumb action film. So,
Not at 11 o'clock at night, mate. No, definitely not. You'll be
but
texting
yeah,
me at 4 o'clock in the morning.
yeah. But I mean, for me, this is kind of like a classic 90s action film. And I definitely think this was kind of like the last great action film of the 90s as well. I know you know, it's a different type of film, and there are action elements to it. But the year after, we had Saving Private Ryan, and I'm not going to say that isn't a great action film. It's a great film, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't class it as an action film because that's something that's actually trying to tell you something, teach you something, give you a little bit more. And you know, even though there are quite clear action elements to Saving Private Ryan, I wouldn't say that is an action film. You know, that's
No, and I guess the two that come to mind for me immediately would probably be, I don't know, like some like Blade and the Matrix, for example. And again, I think there's arguments there, like you've just said, that
well,
they're
that's
not
where I was
pure.
just about to go because this is
They're
the
not pure.
last, yeah, this is the last great action film which was shot the old school way before the Matrix came along a couple of years later and
Yeah, I think
completely
I think you're
changed the
right.
game
I
because
think you're right. And go on,
every
mate.
well, I was just going to say because every subsequent film after the Matrix, it didn't try to be, you know, um, I lost my train of thought there. Every film that came after the Matrix, I was getting hung up watching the film because we're at the prison scene where they're all kicking off. Every film that came after the Matrix, every action film that came after the Matrix wanted to be the Matrix. You know, every film tried to shovel in a bit of wire fu and choreography. They all wanted to work with what was the choreographer's
Oh
name?
yeah, I can't remember his name. I know, I can picture him on the
Something Wu
Matrix
Ping or
extras.
something like that.
Yeah.
And they all wanted a bullet time sequence in there. You know, even films with, I know it's another Travolta film, but fucking Swordfish, you know, a
Mm.
film about domestic terrorists, it throws in a bullet time scene with essentially a claymore exploding, but they did it in a bullet time fashion. Charlie's Angels
I've
had
seen
bullet
that for
time in it.
years.
Shrek
Swordfish. Yeah.
had bullet time in it, and it's just all of these action films that came after The Matrix were not trying to be Con Air. They were not trying to be The Rock. They were not trying to be Face Off. They were not trying to be the Terminator or Terminator 2 anymore. They were all trying to emulate The Matrix.
Yeah.
So this for me, even though this was like, you know, 2 years before the end of the decade, this was the last great 90s action film. This is where they stopped because
Yeah. No
there simply
argument from
wasn't
me.
anything after it for me. So
No, I mean, I guess that sort of golden era is hard to beat even now. Hence why I suppose 22 years later we're sat here at 11 o'clock at night talking about Face Off, and these ones do hold true. Matrix, Blade, Face Off, Con Air, four films that I guess if you were just browsing your telly and you came across one of them, you'd be hard pressed not to stop and watch them.
yeah, if you were born in a certain era and you kind of like you had seen this at one point, you know, as you growing up through your teenage or your formative years, you would definitely throw this on. Um,
Um,
but now it's kind of interesting that these kind of action sensibilities, going back to the practical and going back to the kind of like the real stunt work and all that kind of stuff, minimal use of CGI, minimal use of overly stylized fight choreography. That's all coming back in a big bad way, you know, with
it certainly is, and
the
I'm
John Wick
grateful
films
for it.
and um, I saw the trailer for the Rambo film today. I don't know how you feel about that, but that looks like it's going back to the old school.
it I'm indifferent necessarily to the need for the next Rambo film.
Yeah.
I'm very much in favour of Old Town Road being used on trailers as much as possible. My little boy loves that song and he must hum it and ask Alexa to play it 40 times a day, so it's become one of my favourites too. And so he's only 3 and he didn't really understand when I put it on the telly, but he understood as soon as he started whistling Old Town Road. But yeah, give me that, give me that. But again, it's dragging an old sensibility into the modern day, but they're using Stallone to do it.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's going to end badly for him, but whether that means the style will remain afterwards, with a new generation, who knows? I hope so, because I think there's definitely still a place in the world for that kind of action. As I said earlier on, with Gerard Butler trying to do his best in that kind of situation, but
Mm.
that is a very explosive, heavy CGI fest of drones attacking and this, that, and the other. But the reaction to Fury Road, I always call back to that as my modern equivalent of a classic horror film, classic action film, because of the reliance on practical effects over CGI.
Yeah.
And I think that the film it's exponentially better for it.
Well, you say
Have
that.
you
I
ever
mean,
seen
there
the black
is
and white
quite a lot
version
of
of it?
CGI in there, but the CGI is done to enhance the practical the practical
Yeah, most
effects, and
definitely. And the fact that a lot of these guys on these big massive poles where the cars are driving so fast are
mm,
actually there. I think it enhances the viewing experience. But I was just going to say, have you ever seen the black and white version
yeah,
of
I've
Fury
got both
Road?
versions. So
Mm,
yeah, I've
it's absolutely brilliant.
I've got both versions of that and also Logan as well.
Oh yeah, another one that really benefits from that too. It's fantastic.
It really does, and it doesn't necessarily make it better in my eyes, but it just gives it a different flavour.
Definitely.
And it's really interesting how actually watching a film that was shot in colour, which was meant to be black and white, it's interesting how you actually view the film in a different kind of way. It has a different effect on you almost, and they did it with the Mist as well. They just bringing it back to Thomas Jane. So um, the Mist, if you've got the Blu-ray version of that, there's actually two versions on the same disc. The colorized version, but it was always Frank Darabont always meant for that film to be in black and white.
Yeah,
That's
that's a funny
why
one.
if
Actually,
you watch it in color,
I
the special effects look so shit because they
I
weren't.
was just gonna say I listened to one of my movie podcasts that I do listen to is called Now Playing, and these American lads and they sort of take films apart in a sort of studious manner. Not to be overly critical, but I always enjoyed The Mist, and then I listened to a podcast where they reviewed it and they tore it apart, and I'm keen to watch it again now, knowing with their points in the back of my mind as to whether it would change my perception of
Ah,
the film.
okay.
One of their key issues they've got is the CGI and the way that the way it impacts upon the film when it lessens it from something that could be elevated to then not be. And plus, they hated the ending, whereas I love the ending. So again, I'm going to go back and
Yeah,
watch that in a few days, I
the
think, and
ending's
just check it
devastating,
out.
but even Stephen King actually said it was an improvement on his ending. So,
Yeah, and
when
I
you're
felt
getting
the
that
same,
seal of
when I watched it
approval
back in
from the
the day,
author, you can't
especially
argue with
someone
that.
like Stephen King.
Mm.
But these guys felt differently. They felt like it was a bit of a daft one just done for effect. So I'm going to watch that, I think, in the next couple of days and give that a whirl. So
Will
I'll
you
let
be
you know
watching
what I
the
think.
color version or the black and white then?
I'll watch whatever version my dodgy Plex maker get his hands on.
Uh, yeah. Mm, okay, fair enough. Without hearing the points, I can't really argue against it. I'm sure they, from their point of view, they have some valid points that they make. But to tear a film down purely on the special effects seems a little bit,
They're
because
American.
the rest of the
They're
film.
American.
Oh right, okay.
Let- they can have that. A lot of the stuff they say is interesting. A lot of stuff they say is a bit silly. But yeah, it's called Now Playing. I do recommend it if people have got space in their lives for another quality movie podcast
Well, I
alongside
will.
you.
I'll check them out as well. So I want to hear their thoughts on that because I thought there was actually some really good practical effects in the Mist as well. Yes, the some of the CGI is actually very ropey, but if you go back and watch it in black and white, the seams, less visible. It kind of
Yeah,
it,
and that's a good. That's decent. I think I might make a special effort to ask my pal if he can sort out that version purely to make it a better experience all around.
actually just I'm just wondering if maybe you could just desaturate if you can't get the black and white one. I don't think it would make much difference if you just turned the color down on the TV and just watch it in black and white
No,
that way.
no,
I would
absolutely
imagine
no.
that makes
I might try watching Face Off again with the colour out and see if that boat scene at the end looks any better.
yeah. I don't think that's actually going to change the actual
No,
faces. Yeah, because
maybe I'll just close my eyes if I watch that bit again. That might improve it.
it is very obvious the fact that they are like there's just they might as well have just like swapped them out for I don't know, take your pick, but they don't
Well,
look anything like Travolta
on
or Cage. So.
maybe as a sort of finalish point, that was one of the things I uncovered in my research was the fact that there was a stage in production where they wanted an African American actor to play alongside John Travolta,
Oh
but
really?
I think that would have been far too jarring. I think the undertones with swapping that, and I guess that would have added a
Mm.
whole new subtext as well with the white man living the black man's experience and vice versa. Probably would have made it a little too layered and a little too complicated a film for what it was trying to be.
Well, if Jordan Peele is looking for a new project, then maybe a reboot of Face Off. He could undertake that because he's pretty
Why
good at
not?
doing the whole racial subversion.
He
Um,
certainly is.
although I wasn't a massive fan of Get Out. Take that for what you
I,
will.
I yeah, I enjoyed it. It came out of nowhere for me, but I think a lot of times the films that I kind of watch, not really knowing or hearing a lot about it, do stay with me a bit longer. I haven't seen the follow up yet to Us, and
I
that's on
haven't
my
either.
list.
No, I mean I
Yeah,
didn't
it's on it.
dislike Get Out. I just didn't think it was as great as what everyone was making it out to be. So I was a little bit kind of like, eh. But
Yeah,
obviously,
there's a lot of films like that around, aren't there? Where I've seen them and I've felt completely different to a lot of people. Like I really enjoyed Hereditary. A lot of people I've spoken to think it's a load of
I
rubbish.
really enjoyed it up until the last 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
Well, I thought the last 2 or 3 minutes solidified it in my mind as being something. Yeah, it's all the way through. It's interesting. Then it just doesn't let up, and at the end, it just goes all the way out and dials it up to 1,000. And so I'd
Well, I
rather a
just,
film go
I,
that
f-
way than
yeah, I
not.
just felt the ending was just kind of like, in case you missed the point, this is, it spelt it out far too overtly for
It
me. It was
did. It
just
was
kind
much
of
like
like,
Harry Potter when she totally doesn't trust the intelligence of the audience. So in every single Harry
yeah,
Potter film, there's a scene where they explain what's happened in the last hour and a half in the
yeah.
space of 2 seconds.
Here's the cliff. Have you seen? Did you see Midsummer? Ari Aster's.
No, I haven't. But
I haven't either, but I'm
one thing I get on my list, my Plex list, is an upcoming release schedule for our South Korean hard coded friends, and that's due out in it's Midsummer and Spider-Man Far From Home are both due out in the next fortnight on the old dodgy box. So
right.
I'll be watching that with interest. Not only because I like Florence Pugh, but I've heard good things about Midsummer as well. So I'll be watching that with interest, mate.
Well, Florence Pugh was so good in Fighting with My Family that I can't
Mm.
actually picture Paige as Paige. Whenever I'm watching, because one of the first things, I'm not a big wrestling fan. I've not been a wrestling fan since the Hulk Hogan Ultimate Warrior days. Um, so this whole Paige thing passed me by completely. But one of the first things I did after coming back from watching Fighting with My Family was look for her bout where she won the title from
Oh yeah, yeah.
what's her
In
face.
her debut.
Yeah, and obviously there's differences because the film was painting a picture with her winning over the audience and all this kind of stuff, which is absent from the actual fight. Um, but I just found it really jarring because Florence Pugh was so kind of like pure and good as that character in the film that she became Paige in my mind, and then when I was actually watching the real Paige, I was kind of like, this doesn't feel quite the same. So
No, and I'd probably leave your Googling to probably that. Otherwise, you'll end up with the kind of search history that gets people in trouble because she's, yeah, not a very well-rounded person, unfortunately. Stick
well,
with the Florence Pugh version.
unfortunately, I have come across some of the other things you might be alluding to there, but yeah, I just it's one of those things. So
It is, isn't it? It is.
yeah, yeah, interesting. um,
Well, Florence Pugh's in Black Widow as well, isn't she? I believe as
she
well. She's
is.
playing Yelena Belova. So yeah, she's making a mark in the industry. I saw it out. I watched Outlaw King a few weeks ago on Netflix too, with the Chris Pine
Yeah,
one where he plays a Scottish lord, and again I thought she was decent in that as well. So she's clearly someone that picks and chooses. I know she's not made that many films, maybe only half a dozen or so, but they've all been decent.
yeah. Well, since you've just kind of like touched on Black Widow, it was something I was going to mention before when we were talking about like the whole Disney Marvel stuff. But am I alone in being the only one who was kind of underwhelmed when they revealed the Phase 4 stuff?
A couple of things I'm interested in. I mean, I enjoyed Doctor Strange, so I'm looking forward to see where they go from that. And I'll watch pretty much anything that Taika Waititi does after Ragnarok. But the rest, yeah, I'm very sort of indifferent to. I don't really know a great deal about is it the Eternals?
Mm.
And I'm glad they didn't announce another Ant-Man film because I think that's run its course now as well. But Black Widow, I couldn't really care about. Hawkeye, you could have taken him out the entire Avengers saga with completely anyway. Wouldn't have lost anything for me. Loki, yeah, I'll watch that because that's interesting, and I don't think they've overdone it with him. The fact he's been taken out with the last couple of films for various reasons has maybe made my fatigue in terms of him not so much as it has with a couple of other Avengers.
Fair
I'm
enough.
glad they've not gone. I'm glad they've not gone down the route of doing another solo Hulk film, because I think that wouldn't necessarily work. I'm not
I
sure
don't think they
about.
can. I think the solo Hulk rights still reside with
They
Universal.
do,
Yeah.
they do, but I'm glad that that hasn't changed, because I think we've got Hulk now, and I think we don't need another origin. We don't need another development. I think Ruffalo is perfectly good at it. Let's
Yeah, I
not
think the way
thin
that
that
they've
out
built
anymore.
Hulk around in the MCU as it stands, he works much better as a supporting character as opposed to
Absolutely, he's an ensemble guy,
yeah.
and then we'll see what happens with the rest. But I'm not devastated by it, but I'm not necessarily already penciling dates in my diary to go and watch many of them on opening night.
Yeah, the fact that a lot of them are on the streaming service as TV shows as opposed to theatrical events, that kind of lessens their importance to me in a way. I
Most
mean,
definitely, I've never seen any of the Agents of Shield, for example.
I
Little
stuck with it
things
for
like
a
that. I've
season
not watched
and
them.
I couldn't really. It just it didn't really go anywhere for me. I
No.
heard it got better, but by that point I'm already off the ship, so I never went back to it. I could care less about
Same.
Blade. I really have no interest in Blade. I don't.
The,
It could be great, but
I very much enjoy Blade and Blade 2, but yeah, less said about Blade 3. Yeah, Blade Trinity altogether. So I watched that one with interest, but again, it's not enough to get me put my hand in my pocket. It's one of those ones that I'll wait for it to come out and I can watch it
yeah.
in my living room
I mean,
with a can of lager in my hand or something.
I know what you're saying about Taika Waititi and what he did with Ragnarok and what he's going to do with the next Thor, but I'm not really. I wasn't. I wasn't on board with Ragnarok as much as what everyone else seemed to be. So I was just kind of
Okay.
like, okay. The thing that I'm most interested in out of everything that they announced is the animated show, the What If show. That's the one
All
that
right. Yeah.
I'm most interested in. The rest of them are just kind of like, hmm, hmm, just okay. It feels like a bit of a downer considering everything that's come before. I think everything,
Yeah.
in the first three phases was so well kind of like planned and plotted out uh, that this just
I
feels
think it
like
was
the
always going to feel like
leftovers.
I'm just going to say, I think it was so epic what they've done prior that I think it was always going to struggle to keep up to that high standard. And I think that's
Yeah.
probably part of the reason why they've chosen to avoid the team ups and avoid, an Iron Man or a Captain America style tent pole. They've gone for the sort of the B players, the Doctor Strange and the Ant Man. Sorry, then what's his name? Hawkeye
Hmm.
and the Winter Soldier. Allow them to breathe a little bit and just give people a little bit less of what they want, and so that when the time comes that they do bring them back, people's desire will be even stronger because they'll have been without a Captain America film for 5 years or whatever. And it just I understand the strategy, but I agree with you as well. At the same time, it doesn't grip me out of my chair
No,
with fantastic
it
interest. Not yet,
feels
anyway.
like they want to continue on with kind of like different titles. However, they're not willing to admit that the MCU is over with Endgame. I,
No, and I'd hate to think it is, but I would also be surprised if it ever reached any sort of level of those levels ever again. I think that's been and gone now.
yeah, I think that they should just come out and say actually the MCU is over. Um, as we know it, and this is how it's going to be going forward. We're actually going to focus more on TV shows going forward, um, because we've told the story that we want to tell on a cinematic level, um, and we haven't really got anything else in place. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I agree.
I could be wrong, but it doesn't feel like they're building up to because everyone was like, "Well, who's going to be the next big bad after Thanos? Is it going to be Galactus? Is it going to be um, whoever, is it gonna are they gonna bring Dormammu back? Is it gonna be Doctor Doom? Who's gonna be the next big bad? And it doesn't feel like they have that.
No, and the struggles they had along the way as well in establishing decent villains was always a key criticism, wasn't it?
Yeah,
So whether they can manage it again after getting things to right with Thanos, I have my doubts.
yeah. It's interesting as well because they kind of stumbled along the way with Thanos, especially with
Mm.
like his visual look, because that changed from film to film to film until they finally settled on, the Josh Brolin Thanos.
Yeah, the final one we got.
Yeah, yeah. So it is interesting, but I just kind of like choose to view that in the same kind of prism as I do with recasting Ed Norton with Mark Ruffalo. As if you
Oh yeah,
watched
yeah,
the Incredible Hulk film, um, then it's like a comic book where a different artist did, the art for that comic book as compared to the artist who did, you know, the Captain America or whatever.
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
different drawing.
Different.
If you go
Yeah.
from different issues, then the look of the Hulk changes from, issue to issue to issue, depending on who did the actual artwork for it. It's
Yeah, and
just
it's
a
just a
different
it's just
interpretation.
a visual
So
palette into it. Yeah,
yeah,
I totally agree. It's a good way of looking at it.
yeah. Hmm. Interesting. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that because I felt like it was Marvel just kind of like continuing on autopilot without any kind of real direction and not actually coming out and just being blunt and saying actually sorry guys, MCU's closed now for business. So
Well,
um,
maybe it may be things like the Spider-Man changes and the Spider-Man deals and things like that will
yeah,
maybe force them to rethink those rights. And I hope they don't go down the route of including the X-Men and things like that in there and just doing crossovers for novelty factor and for the sake of it. I don't know if they're that daft really, but then again, you never know, do you? Hopefully
no,
we don't get that, but I'm sure there'll be an audience for it if you were to get Wolverine against Captain America or whatever, punching each other
yeah,
in the face for 2 hours.
Wolverine versus Hulk or whatever. I think they just want Wolverine back, but who they're kind of touting to be Wolverine. I know that Taron Egerton's been kind of his name's been linked to Wolverine. It's like no, no, that's
I
not.
think they're all missing the point. We've got Nicolas Cage there with the freedom to be, and he's probably available as well if you can find him in the next sort of 10 years when he's not making a new film.
Well, I think they've
Stick him
missed a
in.
trick. I think Tom Hardy could have actually been a decent Wolverine. He's certainly got the build when he puts on the muscle,
Yeah, totally.
and he's not a tall guy. He's actually quite a short, stocky guy, which is that's the Wolverine I want to see next. We've had the lanky kind of like chiseled, handsome Wolverine. Now I want the short, squat, stocky guy, with the hairy arms that he used to be in the comic books. That's the version I want. I tell you what, I
Yeah,
did
I'll
see
watch
just
that.
before we wrap this up. Just quickly, I saw one of the worst trailers I've ever seen in my life when I went to watch it today,
Oh, go on.
for a movie called Wolf.
All right, I don't know anything about that. Give me the details.
It looks like it's fighting wolves, but the trailer is absolutely shocking.
Ah, okay. I've not seen that. I didn't know that was even.
One kind of like only on it because the actual teaser trailer started as because they're both Warner Brothers properties, but it started with
Yeah,
a Warner
yeah.
Brothers logo with a load of the red balloons and the kind of
Ah,
screechy, the violin music that they used over the It
yeah, yeah,
trailers,
yeah.
and then Harley
Interesting.
Quinn comes and pops the balloons. She said, "I've had enough of clowns," and it's literally just like a
Mhm.
30-second teaser trailer with her on rollerblades, and then it came up with Birds of Prey. So.
Interesting. Oh, that'd be
Um,
one to keep an eye out for then.
So yeah. Um, I'm really.
Cool.
I think I'm done with comic book films, though. If I'm being honest now.
Yeah, I'm a big comic book fan. Don't get me wrong. And I'm looking forward to Joker only because it's not a Batman film.
Yeah, I did want to get
I
into
love
this
Batman
when you were
films.
talking about it earlier. I saw everything I've seen about this film, specifically the look of the Joker that Joaquin Phoenix is going for, and the fact that it's directed by the guy who did the Hangover movies. It all
It's all
filled me
very
with.
curious, isn't it?
Yeah, it filled me with dread. I was kind of like, I'm not sure I'm ready for this, especially off the back of Heath Ledger putting in the iconic performance that he put in The Dark
Yeah.
Knight. It's one of those. Everything has had me worried up until this point, and now the reviews have started slipping out, and they're all saying it's amazing. I'm actually reassured a little bit, and
But it
I'm
just
going
goes to
into
show,
it with a
doesn't it?
little bit of kind of I'm still cautious, but I'm cautiously optimistic now that we're going to get
Yeah,
something special with it.
I think that looking back at history with the way that Ledger was treated and the way that Ledger was received is comparable to the way I felt about, well, Joaquin Phoenix, yeah, I like him, but the guy from The Hangover, he's taking the piss.
Yeah,
But then when Heath Ledger was cast as the Joker, I was like, well, what the bloody hell's him from 10
yeah,
Things I Hate About You going to bring to this
yeah.
role?
A
So
Knight's Tale,
maybe,
Sir
maybe we
William. Yeah.
maybe we shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but I'll be there. That's one I will be there for opening weekend to check out because I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, I will be honest. I was being probably a little bit kind of too superficial with it because the look of the makeup that they went with that just wasn't Joker to me.
Mm.
So I was kind of like, they've got it wrong. They just
I always wondered whether that would be a work in progress throughout the film, that, and I wonder whether at the end you'll get the traditional the green hair, the face paint. It won't be
yeah.
a clown mask. It will be the Joker mask by the end. So I wonder
Well,
whether that's where they'll end up at the end.
what I do like about it is they've literally, they've gone old school with the kind of. I know there's a lot of footage out there, and if you go on YouTube and put in Joker trailer, you'll get a dozen different trailers for it, but they're all essentially the official kind of promotional material for it is you've had a teaser and you've had a final trailer, and that's it.
Yeah.
All of the other kind of trailers that are doing the rounds are all kind of like fan edits, if you will, that people have put together from various different clips that have been released through different media outlets and stuff. But the official promotion has been, here's your teaser, here's your full trailer, which is also the final trailer, and now the
Yeah, it's
film's
very
coming
low
out.
key.
Yeah,
I
and
don't
it's
think I've seen a single TV spot or a post on a bus.
that's
You
how
know,
it should be, for
mm,
films like this. It's kind of like that's how you build up an air of mystery around your film.
most definitely.
And that's how you build up the anticipation of the film. Not releasing, 10 dozen fucking TV spots which give away the entire fucking story of the film.
Well, that's why I said at the start of the show, mate, that I've reached the end with my when a film comes out that I'm really excited
Mm.
for, like Rise of Skywalker, anything like that. I will not bother watching trailers when it gets within a couple of months of the film coming out because that's when they real start information dumping on you in terms of what's going to happen during the film. And
Yeah.
I want the air of mystery and certain things to be a surprise to me. Which, if you pay attention to all the TV spots, all the trailers, anything that you can find, this day and age you feel like you've already seen half the film
Yeah.
before it comes out. So
And
so
all
this
of
will
these
be
videos
the
on
end for
YouTube
me.
where they're theorizing about this, that, and the other, it's
Yeah,
like, is Rey a
I just
clone,
try.
or why she got a double-ended lightsaber? Is she Darth Maul's daughter? And blah 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 blah. It's like
Yeah,
just that.
just
When
enjoy the film and just don't worry about it till you get there.
Yeah, don't
Excuse
think
me, till you
about
get
it.
there.
Don't overthink about it. Don't build up the anticipation because when you do that in your mind, you go into it, you set your expectations like, oh, Rey's definitely going to turn to the dark side, or she's definitely a clone, and or this or that and the other. And then when that thing that you've been thinking about for months and months and months doesn't happen in the film, of course you're not going to enjoy it as if you would
That's exactly
just by
right.
just going in and watching the fucking film.
Exactly right. There's an argument for one day when I'm in charge of everything, just get rid of trailers altogether.
Hmm. See,
We don't need.
one day when I'm in charge of everything, I'll just get rid of everyone altogether. But that's the grump side of me coming out. I'll get rid
There
of
we
all
go. You
stupid.
lasted 2.5 hours, mate. You're doing really well as well.
Oh, that's not too bad for me actually. So.
Nah, I like it. It's great.
I think we've kind of run out of things to say about Face Off, other than it's just a really fucking fun ride with some really
I
good
think we ran
action
out of
set
things to say
pieces.
about an hour ago, to be honest.
We
Mate.
did, but I just wanted to have a chat with you, mate, because it's been a
No,
while since we had a conversation.
it's been
So,
brilliant, and I totally agree about Face Off. It's just one of those films that stands the test of time. Yeah, it's got its moments where it's a bit daft. It's got its moments where it's the CGI lets it down, but ultimately it's a fun 2 hours where you don't really have to think about it too much. But if you want to, there's plenty there for you.
yeah, definitely. If you do want to delve a little bit deeper in there, it will actually, make you have some uncomfortable thoughts or feelings about, who's a bad guy, who's a good guy. Should I be feeling sorry for this person? Should I not be? On top of all of kind of like the visceral kind of visual images that John Woo puts out, lots of sparkly explosions, lots of doves flying and raincoats kind of like fluttering in the breeze, and all this kind of stuff, and then the really creepy stuff like you know palming someone's face as if that's some kind of sign of
I
affection.
found that incredibly uncomfortable every single time they did it. I,
Isn't
I
it
was less I
just?
was less creeped out by the brother and sister getting it on than I was by John Travolta keep putting his hand over
Yeah.
everyone's face like he was trying to work out what I don't even know what he was
He,
trying to
he
do. It was
does it
obviously trying
to
to be
he does it to Dominic Swain at one point, and he's kind of like one of his fingers just catches her bottom lip and just curls it down a little bit, and I was like, ugh, no, no, there's something wrong about that. That is wrong on multiple levels, and I can't explain why. Um,
yeah. No,
yeah,
very strange choice, whatever that was.
yeah, and then when she does it to the little kid at the end, I'm just kind of like,
Yeah, we don't need that to continue as a family trait, mate. Leave that behind.
yeah, and also she can't run for shit because when he's coming back at the end and he's kind of bathed in the sunlight through the fucking kitchen window, and she sees him at the doorway and she runs to him. She does like this 4-year-old's run, where they kind of lean forward into the run before the legs have had time to catch up with how fast they're running.
I've
So
never noticed that before, but as soon as we finish, I'm immediately going to go on YouTube and watch a running to see if it's as
yeah,
ridiculous
it's
as you've
always
described.
it all just kind of like it's one of those images that's always kind of stuck with me. When something happens in the film that your brain just registers that's not quite right. There's something off about that, and then you
I will
start.
definitely be
Yeah,
checking that out.
she just. I suppose it's just typical girl run. Maybe I'm just being sexist. So
Maybe she just never learned.
yeah. Ah well. Well, that's Face Off, guys. Thank you very much for talking about it with me, Chris. I know we didn't really talk about it for much, but we covered a lot of bases there. So
We did, mate.
yeah,
And I've really enjoyed myself, and I always do enjoy coming on, and always enjoy listening to you guys. So thanks for you and Lee for your continued hospitality.
no problem whatsoever. And also, if you guys are jonesing for more podcast action, you actually have your own podcast, which has been,
Mm,
I'm sure it's actually been quite eventful the past couple of weeks
it
with
certainly
everything that's going on. So,
does. Yeah, it's related to Bolton Wanderers, and it's called my website. It's called thelineofviennasuite.com, and the podcast is named the same as well. We're just recorded episode 125 last week, so it's been a long running thing. We've been doing it for about 4 or 5 years or so. We got a lot better lately at putting out regular episodes. We kind of had a bit of a three to 6 month kind of slack time, just when things were really getting the most juicy with Wanderers because nobody really had the appetite for it. But hopefully now things are back on an even keel. We'll be recording regularly. We record on a Sunday, so if you're interested, the Twitter account is at Line of Vienna STE, and there's all the various Facebook, Instagrams, and all that kind of thing that I have no involvement in whatsoever. But yeah, come and join us. We're a friendly bunch.
so there you have it, guys. That's pretty much it. I know it's been a while since we've had the last episode up. I am going to try and get back on track with the Marvel commentaries. I'm going to try and get the first Avenger out soon, so keep your eye out for that. Once again, thanks to Chris for being my co-host for this episode.
Anytime, mate. Anytime.
Thank you very much. Shout out to Mr. Peak. He'll be back with, I think he's going to do an episode with Paul Monahan. They're going to be covering Mortal Kombat, that cinematic classic from Paul W.S. Anderson.
I look forward to that one.
Yeah, I won't. I've been dodging that. I've been dodging Mortal Kombat for a while because I've never really gelled with that. But yeah, I don't know if I'll get on that one. I'll leave them to it. No, I'll leave them to it. Decision's been made. And also thanks to Dean from Jump Cancel for filling in for me on the Transformers episode. And most importantly, thank you to all of you guys who have taken the time to download, listen, stream, however you listen to the podcast. Thank you for keeping the downloads going in our absence. So that's it. Thanks very much, guys, and we'll catch you on the next episode soon. Bye.